Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Copeland Open for Business Conference, and welcome to Whitehaven Golf Club this morning. As a local lad born and raised in the area, watching that film brings on the realisation I really should get out more. Some fantastic shots of the area and the borough where we're also proud to live. So today, on with the conference. And today is really getting the message out that Copeland is open for business. So what are we going to try and cover in today's conference? Well, what we're going to try and do is showcase all that is good about Copeland. We've seen some visual images, just what a fantastic environment that we live in. Copeland, 60% of our landmass sits in the Lake District National Park. And from environment and lifestyle, that means a really fantastic place to live and work. What we're also going to try to do today is highlight the level of inward investment that's coming into the area over the coming years, and also get a real understanding of the level of investment and spending power that already exists within Copeland. What we also want to do is set out a vision of what we want Copeland to be and what we expect it should be. For me, it's all about this borough now beginning to align its ambition along with its potential. I think for too long we've accepted less than we deserve and less than we should have. And I think now is the time to set the bar higher, reach for the stars, and really as a borough to start fulfilling some of that potential. So we'll focus today on how Copeland can fulfill some of its vast potential, which is probably unparalleled anywhere else in the UK at this current time. And today is about getting the message out to a wider audience of just what the scale of investment is and what the opportunity this borough offers to the business community, to innovators, to investors, to entrepreneurs, because the message I would send out to you at this time, there is no better place to be. In Copeland we've got some fantastic foundations of which we can build upon. One of the things that's really been driven home to me since coming into office back in May is the strong sense of community that we have, and some of the work, parish councils, community groups, and the things that they achieve in the communities has been fantastic. And that goes to the charitable and the voluntary sector, right through every walk of life in Copeland, and it's been a pleasure to experience some of that. It's already, and we've seen some, again, I mentioned the visual images, but, nationally, Copeland has been recognised as one of the best places to live in the whole of the UK. We have low crime rates. We have high earnings in comparison to house prices, and that correlation, relates to a lot of disposable income, a lot of spending power. And it's a real good foundation to build upon. We've got low crime rates. We're in a very safe environment. So people moving into the area, not only is it a beautiful place to live, with prosperity and prospects, it's also a very safe place to live. And in terms of education, our educational attainment of our people is in line with national averages. And there's some great work being done. We've got 37 nurseries and primary schools that have received outstanding in Ofsted reports. And, with the work of our MP, Jamie Reid, our nuclear partners and the councils, we've come together where the shovel will be in the sand to deliver a fantastic new educational academy to go with the 2 universities that we've already got on the Westlake Science Park. So we have got some fantastic opportunity to build upon, not least a nuclear supply chain spend that is already annually in excess of 2 billion. And a lot of people look at the area and think it's a nuclear-only, nuclear-dependent area, but that isn't what it should be seen as, or what it should be going forward. Because also in Cumbria, we've got a 2.4 billion tourism industry. That's absolutely huge, and there's real potential for us to build and get more in Copeland than we do currently out of both the tourism industry and the nuclear supply chain. And we need to get that not just as a sense of entitlement, but because we deserve it, because we have the self-belief, the ability and the wherewithal to get up and grab our share of it. I think the days of just sitting back and feeling we're entitled to it and it should be gifted, we've got to take a whole new, different attitude and approach to that. In terms of the tourism part, I've already said we've got 60% of Copeland sits in the Lake District National Park, and we've got a 2.4 billion income and 32,000 jobs in Cumbria in tourism, but in Copeland there's only 8% of that finds its way into Copeland. And as you've seen on the video, some of the most beautiful parts of the national park sit within the boundaries of Copeland, and there's so much more that we can do in tourism. So we have a fantastic opportunity to build on what we already have. So really, it's all about setting out a vision of where Copeland can be and what we can achieve. It's about setting the bar high. And, we've invited businesses from all over, and it's fantastic to see people in such huge numbers, because the people in the room can make this happen. As political figures, me as Mayor, Jamie as MP, I think all we can do is create an environment and a situation where business can prosper. But there's people and there's organisations in this room that can actually make things happen and can make us not only set high ambitions but fulfil them also. In terms of local governance, I see the role as the council as a non-political role. I see my role as mayor as representing the best interests of the people of Copeland and the borough that we all live in. I'm happy to entrust the political arguments that we need made in this area to the politicians such as Jamie the MP, and I know he'll fight our corner from a political point of view, but at a local level, as mayor and as councillors, what we've got to do is represent the interests without political bias, but just what's best for Copeland. So I'm not driven in any way in that respect. What we've got to do is streamline the way the council works, and we've done a lot of work in the early months in streamlining and giving the council a whole new perspective and direction, that we've got to act like a business, think like a business, work and operate like a business, and generate a commercial environment where we can tap in to the unlimited potential that exists within this borough. We've got to diversify our local economy. We've got to become an area of self-reliance and self-dependence. I've been around here long enough to see the boom and the bust, and without a doubt, without any information, there will be a boom again in Copeland. But what we've got to do is make sure that's a lasting boom where we have a sustainable and diverse economy. And that's by using nuclear not just as a one-stop shop to meet all our needs, but as a platform on which we can expand all sorts of other industry by tapping into the supply chain, by exploiting the tourism opportunity, and by developing industries around where we can really move the area forward, that when the new build's finished, we have a sustainable economy that can export into the wider world. In the new modern internet age, it really doesn't matter where you're based, but there isn't a more picturesque and better environment to base your businesses going forward. Part of that is it's interlinking a lot of things together. There'll be a big focus, from us at a local level at regenerating our towns, our villages. I want to walk around Whitehaven, Cleatamua, Millham, Egremont, and I want those places to reflect the prosperity that's in the area. I've talked about the levels of disposable income, of investment coming in, and that's got to be a pull to retailers, potential hoteliers, people trying to develop leisure facilities, things in the arts. We've already got all the scenery and that type of thing, and that is the way, bringing these things together, that will attract professional people into our area. We hear a lot about migrant workers. Some of these contracts that are coming up are long contracts where, what we want to do is people to see Copeland as a place to move their families and to live and work permanently. So along with that, we have ambitions to build houses on an unprecedented level that's not being seen in Copeland. House building that suits all levels of socio-economic class and affordability. We want to work with our planners, with the Lake District National Park, to open up areas for exclusive development, so the estate agents and property developers are pointing people into Copeland and not out of Copeland. And education and training. You know, I've already mentioned we've got 2 universities where, you know, the primary education in the area is first class. You know, some great work has been done in the development of the campus, and it gives us a real platform to build on. And I think we've got Stephen Lester in the room anyway. Is he today? Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the meeting. Stephen is the soon-to-be principal of West Lakes Academy, which is one of the great success stories of Copeland. And only last Sunday on Classroom Heroes, West Lakes Academy was recognised nationally as the best English department in the whole of the UK. And I think we should give that a round of applause. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And Stephen, please take that back to West Lakes. I think the whole area is proud of what they've achieved. To be the best team nationally in education sends out a fantastic message for Copeland, and it's an example that we can spin off into all areas of Copeland, because that, you know, the development. You know, I'm an Egremont lad. I grew up. I actually went to that school, and it's former guys as Wyndham, and where it's come from to where it's got to is just an example of what can be achieved here. So, you know, well done Team English, and well done West Lakes Academy. But, you know, in terms of yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what we want to do, you know, going forward is in terms of educational attainment, we're as good as anywhere else in the country, but we want to create this type of diverse and broad economy that we can retain our best kids, that when they go off to university and they get qualified, there's enough variance and choice in our economy that they want to come home and come back, and we don't lose all our best talent. So, you know, in summary, what are we all about? Why are we holding this conference, and what are we driving to in Copeland? Well, we want prospects and opportunity for the people of Copeland. We want to attract businesses and professional people to come to Copeland. You know, it's not all about we want it all for ourselves and the people who are already here. You know, we want businesses to look at the opportunity and to pitch up here. You know, we want professional people to look at the environment, to look at the opportunity. And we can get consultants and teachers to come to our fantastic new hospital and some of the fantastic new schools that we're building, and we get professional people who come and add value, and the money that they earn in Copeland they can spend in Copeland, and all the things I've already spoke about, create a set of circumstances that can really make that happen. As I've said, we want to retain our talented young people by giving them diverse opportunities in a broad-based economy. And we want our towns and villages to reflect the prosperity of the area. And already we're starting to make real progress on that. We want to significantly improve infrastructure. There is some myths around the place about infrastructure, that we're the only people that suffer from poor infrastructure. But, you know, having worked in Birmingham, in London, in Manchester, you know, you don't move very far, very fast on the M60, the M42 and the M25. And you can go 50 miles in Copeland quicker than you can go 11 miles around the M25. But notwithstanding, we do need to put pressure on the government and bring people together to improve the infrastructure, to make things even better than they are. But we need to have some realism around that as well. And, it's combining efforts. It's all about working in partnership. You know, my prime goal is as mayor of this community is to create an environment where we can work in partnership with all stakeholders to create a better future for this area and for the people that reside in it. And it is, I will keep coming back to it, about aligning our ambition with our potential. The potential is huge and it's unparalleled anywhere. I hope over the course of the day you all enjoy the conference, you take the opportunity to network and listen to some fantastic speakers, the first of which I will invite to the stage now. Our first speaker today is Rob Johnson of the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce, who deals with over 15,000 businesses in Cumbria. So please give a warm welcome to Rob Johnson.
Thanks, Mike. Just checking with the microphones. Thank you very much. I think I'll move away from that because it's a bit tall for me. Can't see most of you at the back. It's like a sort of giant wedding reception, this. There are people in here who, and thanks, Mike, it's tremendous what you've done here to get so many people together across such a broad church, really. And that's why it's a little bit like a wedding reception. And people that I've known for many years, and some of you meeting for the first time in a couple of years, as sort of drunken uncle in the back and that lot. But it's fantastic. And it really is good. And actually, the inspiration of the opening video, and Keith is here somewhere, the company made that video, based in Copeland, remember him. You might want to use his services. Blatant plug for him there. And Mike, an inspirational opening speech, I think. And for the first time, I think, and I think this is why we're so keen to work with Mike and his team, is that we're really, really looking at the positives, the fantastic opportunities that we've got in Copeland and over the whole of Cumbria, really. I say that on behalf of the wider Cumbria business community. I've been asked to sort of set the scene a little bit, and I want us to really sort of drop in a few thoughts in this for discussion as the day goes on, really, on how we can influence our future ourselves. One of the things that I was sort of tasked to do was to tie it into regional strategies and the economic plan developed by the LEP for the county. And to put that in context, the economic plan for the county has four prongs called the four-pronged attack. Three of those prongs directly relate to where we are at the moment: nuclear and energy, advanced manufacturing, and a vibrant rural and visitor economy. Put that in context, we are a rural economy. We might have large-scale industrial activity, but we're still nested in a rural environment. So if there was a codification of the opportunity, three of the four, the other one's the M6 corridor, which is really not that relevant, although it might help us bring things into the county. So we're absolutely bang in the middle of opportunity. And the relevance of that is that resonates with government, because the one thing the LEP has done is created a route to government for discussion and debate and potential funding. So we just park the funding thing at the moment, because that's only part of it. So that's the sort of relevant. That's the strategic stuff over, because I had to do that. We've been here before. We've seen some opportunity here before. Those of us who, like myself, are old enough to remember the development of Thorpe. And my overriding memory of that, and that of a number of people I've spoken to, is the leave behind was the old hall disco and some caravan parks at Wasdale. So we've got to do better than that this time, and I think we will, because I think we've got a great range of organisations and partners, and great leadership within our local authority with Mike. So I'm hoping and expecting great things. Those of us in a position like mine and the guys in Beck really have got to get our acts together on your behalf, and we're pledging to do that, because there is a lot that we need to do in this space. My team has spent some significant days before this trying to research what has worked around the world with a similar opportunity. And the one thing that is consistent, there isn't a silver bullet. It is up to us to make sure that we've got the partnerships and the relationships, and we create that positive feeling for investment. And we aim to do that with the Chamber of Commerce. Very briefly, just on the Chamber of Commerce, for those that don't know, we are an organisation owned by our membership. We have 1,500 members. We have 3 brands within the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce itself, Made in Cumbria, which has 300 members who produce food and drink, fantastic products and craft products. And we have a project called The Growth Hub, which is our biggest single activity. I'll talk about The Growth Hub later, which is our business support attack brand, and that's very significant in what we're aiming to do over here in this part of the county, and indeed spread that across the county and into the wider northern powerhouse, and I'll talk about that later. But for sure, there's no silver bullet. But there are actually 2 key areas that we can influence, and I want to talk about those, and I'd like if you pick them up throughout the day and to create some challenge on this. Because one of the things we looked at was where were the lessons learned in other areas of the world. So the first thing I did was talk to the guys in Savannah River in the States, similar opportunities, very, very exciting. So I sent loads of emails to Chambers of Commerce over there and the Greater Brotherhood, and I met a stony silence. So clearly America is not as open as it would like to be. We're not going to give up on that. But the message was, maybe there isn't anything unique that we can share there that is going to work for us. So we look closer to home. And the really exciting thing is that if you look deep enough, there's some really good learning come out of the Olympics. And some of the lessons in the Olympics you'll hear me continue to refer back to because it's very relevant, and it's very relevant in our space. And the first of those, if you take the two key aspects we feel we can influence and we can work with you as a chamber on, is that, like just by capturing the opportunity from migrant workers. Now, this is reasonably well codified, but actually, I'd like to unpack that for a moment, if you bear with me, because it isn't just about we're going to shove them all in a porta cabin somewhere. We missed a real opportunity last time round. The lessons learned from the Olympics is that right from the very top, you must build in innovation and sustainability into your contracting relationship all the way down. If it isn't there at the top, it will not appear by magic down. And the really clever things, and for those of you in construction may well have read the Concrete Producers News or whatever it's called, which is a really interesting one, but there was some very clever innovation came out. The important thing about that is that innovation came out not just in affecting the delivery of the Olympics on time and the profitability of the businesses, it created new products or services that those businesses could take to new markets, and pick it up on Mike's point, diversifying. So if we're going to grow the horizontal opportunity rather than just the basic supply chain opportunity, those issues need to be built into the way that the contracts demand innovation and sustainability. The other thing we want to do as an organisation, we'll work with Beck on these, is to begin to foster a dialogue between planners, investors and construction companies. We've been lobbied quite hard by, and quite rightly by, a number of our members who are saying that, are we mindful of the modern building techniques that can be used in creating new structures that mean that those structures can be repurposed efficiently later, and that then makes a different opportunity for an investor to move in for an investment, say, for short-term migrant worker housing or a hostel accommodation that future can be turned into quality housing, affordable housing, or hotel accommodation to support the visitor offer. And that is a really key issue. And at the moment, there is no dialogue around there in this area. We are going to get involved in that as a pledge from the Chamber of Commerce today, work with Beck and other partners to get that dialogue going between planners, investors and construction companies, because that is the one thing we believe could make a real difference to the future when we come out of this phase of the migrant workers. So there's a big issue around there. So we make no bones about that. The second, and this is really, really important, is making sure that the businesses that are here maximise the opportunity out of it, and indeed any businesses that are coming to invest in Cumbria, and I'll touch on that again in a moment, but also there are businesses that will come out of this phase, we hope, that we don't know what they are at the moment or where they're going to go. I was lucky enough to be at an event recently where I met a young guy who'd set up a business, and I've got a background in IT services, so I should know this. And he explained to me this exciting business that employed 80 people that had grown in 2.5 years from nobody to 80 people. And what he did, and I can tell you, I have no idea what that business did, but I do know it did something in IT on the internet and employed some people and paid them quite a lot of money. And what I'm trying to sort of say there is that we need to plan for what we don't know and the business opportunities. So our business support systems and matrices need to be, and networks need to be relevant for those businesses that come along. Because one thing for sure, if they're created here by our young people and they are successful, they will stay here. The boardroom is always the last place to close down. So in essence, we need to think about fostering and supporting those innovative businesses that come along. And then to do that, we need to make sure that all of the partners, ourselves, Beck, particularly in that space, are working closely together. We mentioned earlier the Growth Hub. The Growth Hub is a very big project. We've just finalised the next phase of European funding that we've drawn down. Chamber has committed 3.5 million of its own funds and through commercial activity. The reality is we want to match that with Europe, so that's now 7 million of core funding and going on to closer to 10 when we put the business startup funding into it. So we are working hard to ensure that we've got a stable business support service that's fit for purpose, that will help businesses that come along grow and diversify. Mike Morris, my colleague's with us today, so if anybody's interested at all in getting involved in that, we've got a great service there. Over 50 advisors, advice on growth, internationalisation, employment. We've got access to funding through the Chamber of Commerce's RGF fund. We've got a £4 million fund for business growth in there. So all that's available, and that's on the table to support this. So anybody that is thinking of growing at all, please speak to us. We can network you in, and we can give you some support and some advice on how to do that. So the Growth Hub's going to be doing that. We know that Steve and the team at Beck are looking at a supplier portal at the moment. We've for some time looked at a supply portal that's been operating in Somerset by Somerset Chamber of Commerce. It's been very good. We want to help Steve and his team get that working, because it will be able to bring forward opportunities very efficiently in a way that uses IT and service technology in a way that was maybe not done before. That's very good. Alongside of that, and very importantly for us, the Growth Hub is doing some development work. We did an initial pilot project on supply chain readiness and development for businesses with UCLAN. That proved to be a very successful pilot, and we're going to roll that forward starting around about Christmas, and developing some online learning and development opportunities to network with other businesses, peer-to-peer support, all in a confidential area of the Growth Hub portal. So we're building some of the mechanics in the background that will start to create support and foster opportunities. So that's quite important, I think. And again, if anybody's interested, we're happy to talk about that today. All part of trying to provide the mechanism behind what Mike said at the beginning of today, was the vision of how do we make this work. How do we, I use the term, sort of democratise the spend, make sure that as the money flows through, it sticks on as many businesses as possible, and influences the economy as much as possible. So there's that. There's also two other initiatives which I'd like you to be aware of, and particularly businesses here today, because we're doing some work on behalf of LEP on this. There are two significant projects under development, some significant plans which will inform the future of our workforce and our ability to get workforce here. One is the skills plan, and that's been headed by the Skills Commissioner, Alan Wilson from Pirelli. The importance of the skills plan is that it is going to set out how the funding flows over the next few years for skills support, and it's really, really important that businesses get involved in that. I won't go on too much about how we do it now, but we're running some events, some engagement events, that will set the framework for what we will get in terms of spend to support our skills aspirations for businesses. It is really, really important we get involved with this. And the other is AECOM, the Arthur Lepper, producing an infrastructure plan. Mike touched on infrastructure earlier. And again, we're doing some engagement events on that, and I really implore you to get involved in that, because without these plans in place, there isn't the evidence base to get access to and influence the decision makers. They're absolutely key in our future. And I'll tell you the significance of this is that we do have a challenge in Cumbria. The rest of the UK is a challenge. Our demographics are going in the wrong direction, and we stand a good chance of losing a lot of our active workforce in the next 5 years. We've got to make sure that as that workforce mobilises, the skills are in place for us as businesses to be able to make sure we've got the workforce that we require. But the mobilisation of that workforce will be very different to anything that's gone before. And that's because not just the travel to work, but the travel to learn areas are going to change significantly. So we need to start thinking a little bit wider and more accepting of where our workforce might want to be. I see Copeland as the epicentre of this. This is the driver. The three of the four prongs of the LEP's strategic plan are in Copeland, but we will need to work with other parts of the county. We will need to work across to Carlisle. Carlisle has got aspirations to grow. It would be good if we could get businesses into Carlisle who may not come to West Cumbria, but we would be better getting them there than in somewhere in the northwest. So it's pulling it close to home, making the local economy work for us, because there is a real challenge. There's going to be a real challenge on getting the workforce that we require to fund that. So I think those two projects that I'd sort of implore you to get involved with. Some of the interesting findings coming out of the Olympics, and again, this is where it comes down to organisations like ourselves to pull this together, are some of the innovation that came around supply and movement of materials. New constructs appeared that didn't exist before, and those constructs appeared in the way of business opportunities around movement by rail for example, and a consortium pulled together to run a railhead that could provide some of the, and this is where we square the circle, some of the aspirations of the core contract, which is 50% of the materials for the Olympics had to be delivered by rail. There was no one organisation who could do that. By pulling a number of organisations together through a set of brokering relationships, an organisation came up and it was set up and it delivered that objective. So it keeps going back to my point about we need to make sure that the demand of sustainability and innovation, the reason sustainability and innovation is so important, I keep banging on about this, is they're the leave behind after the spend goes through. And that cuts across not just infrastructure, but into the businesses themselves. And we are in an exciting time. It's never been easier to export your product around the world. It's never been easier to market your product around the world. So there is no reason why we here should feel distant from any market. We're about 3.5, if you stretch it, hours away from the world's financial capital. That's very close to a lot of things. But the reality is that the logistics market and the internet is changing the way businesses do business. We need to harness that so that our businesses can trade. We need to harness it through projects like our Growth of Portal project. We'll create forums and discussion that will add value to it. Finally, I'm just going to touch on the Northern Powerhouse, which some of you may have heard of, as our Chancellor's made it his platform. This is causing some of us a little bit of grief at the moment because it appears to us a little bit like a brand without a product. But it creates, I guess, a focus and a really useful focus on the north of England, of which we are part of. We are not on the edge of the Northern Powerhouse here. We are in the middle of the Northern Powerhouse. We will be the power of the Northern Powerhouse. We are actually fundamentally part of it. So we must start thinking about being central to that. What we are doing as Chambers of Commerce is we've set up a Chamber of Commerce group who will look at shared business opportunities across that. Because at the end of the day, I'm a bit of a northern lad, and I'm quite proud that in the north of England we make stuff. And that's why I quite like the Northern Powerhouse. But I'm also a Cumbrian, and I think in Cumbria, when you look at our economy, it is predominantly about manufacturing. It's absolutely part of our DNA is making stuff here, as is the nuclear industry. The two together make an absolutely fabulous opportunity, as we said earlier. So we will be working as an organisation with chambers across the whole of the north, particularly at looking at opportunities to work together. And where we see this working is that where we may have a small business in Copeland here who want to upskill, see some opportunity, but seek a partner that they will need to work with so they can come back in at a higher level. And we see that as being something that is going to be a challenge, but it is a tremendous opportunity to get those business brokerages working so that we can help our local businesses upskill. We will sit behind that with a business support programme, which is directly focused on supporting that, and we'll be committed to delivering our role. So where do we fit in? We see ourselves as having the baton on brokerage and making things happen, and we're going to do that with partners like Beck, and we're going to do it with the vision that Mike is bringing to Copeland. Thanks again for the opportunity, Mike, and happy to ask questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Robbie's from the Chamber of Commerce, and they play a real key role in facilitating some of the business growth that we're looking for in Copeland over the next few years. You know, Rob's also a fellow board director of the LEP. For those who don't know what the LEP is, that is the Local Enterprise Partnership and the government vehicle for business funding. And it's things like the LEP, the Chamber of Commerce, and Britain's Energy Coast, ourselves as councillors that really need to form a real joined up and coherent approach to make sure that we find the best way forward in building and diversifying our economy. I missed out earlier, and I should have probably brought up earlier, you know, in terms of diversification of the economy, we're joined in the room today somewhere by Kevin Murphy, who's the project manager for West Cumbria mining. And again, mining is part of the heritage of Copeland. I guess I'm looking at Raymond Gill of one, but we've got a few former coal miners in the place, and coal mining has been formed a historic and part of Copeland's past. And West Cumbria Mining have just discovered 300 billion tonnes of coking coal under the sea off St. Bees. And by 2018, we hope that coal will start to be mined at 2.5 billion tonnes a year. And the upshot for Copeland is another 3,000 jobs, potentially in a diverse economy. By the end of today, if you didn't come here thinking Copeland is the place to be for an innovator and investor, I'm sure I hope by the end of it that you do. My next speaker today, who I believe has now arrived in the building, I'm hoping he has arrived in the building, is Dr. Paul Howarth. On the agenda, you can see Paul down as the chair of CORN. He's also the chief executive of National Nuclear Laboratories. Before I go on about CORN, with having the National Nuclear Laboratory, which is involved in all the research and at the leading edge of nuclear research, with UCLAN at West Lakes and the biggest nuclear site in Europe, and a fantastic new hospital facility. And one of the things that we'd like to do is to facilitate bringing those together and creating a chair of nuclear medicine, to really try and develop research, to bring our hospital to life and attract the consultants, and really advance the West Cumbria training campus. And if we can do that and attract the trainees and the doctors up that can put the facilities in that hospital, it's another unique opportunity, because as I said, with NNL, with the nuclear industry and West Cumberland Hospital, all within a stone's throw of each other, it presents us with a fantastic opportunity. Paul's here today, and he may touch on that, but he's here today in his role as the chair of CORN, which is the acronym of the Centre of Nuclear Excellence. And make no mistake, here in Copeland, we are at the centre of nuclear excellence. It's a complex, complicated industry of which we are world leaders, without any doubt. And that's another thing that we should be shouting from the rooftops, because there's not many boroughs in the UK that house an industry that you can say leads the world in innovation, in technology and in development, but it does sit here right on our doorstep. Please can you give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul Howarth.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much, Mike, for the introduction. What I'm going to do is to give you a bit of an overview, as Mike said, over what the Centre of Nuclear Excellence actually is. And as Mike mentioned, that's not my day job. My day job is running the National Nuclear Laboratory, which is situated just a few miles to the south of here. And we do regard ourselves in our own right as an international centre of excellence as far as nuclear research is concerned. Now, this was touched on at the start of the presentation. Many people that will be thinking of Cumbria, that are outside Cumbria, are probably thinking of this as the image. What I'm going to do today is take you on a bit of a journey which really sets out why Cumbria is absolutely essential to the UK's energy policy, and indeed defence and also economic growth policies as well. So hopefully by the end of this presentation I will have thoroughly convinced you of that. The key thing really is the objective today is to explain how Cumbria does sit at the heart of the UK's energy policy. Also, of course, links to defence, with Borough being also in the region, and indeed the economic growth objectives as well. But in order to do this, we really effectively need a new way of working, where everybody is coming together, pulling in the same direction to achieve these aims and aspirations. But what I do detect at the moment within the region is a very strong sense and desire that everybody wants to pull in the same direction and work together to achieve these aims and objectives. So what I'm going to do is take you on a bit of a journey. Where have we come from as far as nuclear is concerned? Now, I am going to focus on nuclear energy to start with. I do recognise that we have got BAE systems just down the road at Borough as far as defence is concerned. And I do recognise, and I will explain, how we see nuclear linking in and supporting the wider economy as far as Cumbria is concerned. But bear with me, because I'm just going to focus on what I see at the centre of this at the moment being nuclear. 2003, the UK set out its energy policy, which was laudable at the time, which was a significant reduction in CO2 emissions. However, what they said was they would achieve that through renewable generation, and they would see a phase-out, effectively, of nuclear. So in 2003, this industry was effectively told by government for us to decommission, shut up shop, go home, lock the gates at the fence and kick the cat out. You're done, thank you very much. We're going for renewables. What happened since then over the next 10 or so years, myself and others were very closely involved in working with government to explain and articulate why nuclear needs to be a central part of the UK's energy mix. And the journey we went on over the subsequent years completely transformed that. We went through the reconsideration of nuclear and also the Energy White Paper around 2007. And then finally, we worked very closely, and I personally got quite closely involved with the House of Lords, of setting out the nuclear industry strategy. In 2003, the government effectively did a 180-degree turn and basically said that nuclear is a fundamental, central part of our energy mix. So much so that they want the UK to be back at the top table of nuclear nations. And there are roughly sort of like 5 or so top-tier nuclear nations. We were there in the past from our heritage, very much what was done here a number of decades ago. And what the government said, we want that seat back at that top table. Now, bear with me on this. It might look a bit technical, but I'll explain it to you. And this was really, I sat in a meeting with the chief government scientist, and this was when there was just a dawning realisation that we have a massive problem as far as our energy policy is concerned and the track that we need to go on. Basically, now enshrined in UK law is an 80% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2050. And we need to look at how actually are we going to achieve that. What the diagram just shows, a lot of modelling work that concludes there's 3 ways of getting there, which are shown on the outside. Higher renewables, higher carbon sequestration, or higher nuclear. Basically, we need to wean ourselves off the use of fossil fuels for our transportation sector. We have a grid size around about 80 gigawatts. We use an awful lot of energy in the form of oil. That's what's killing us as far as our CO2 emissions are concerned. To get off that, we need to electrify it. If we're going to electrify it, we need to look at those technologies. Basically, our grid size by 2050, 2075, needs to be over 4 times the size of what it is now. That means the only way of achieving it is you need 130 gigawatts of renewables, 130 gigawatts of carbon sequestration, and 130 gigawatts of nuclear. So far, the grid penetration as far as renewables are concerned, we probably have about 5 gigawatts that gives us 2. So that shows you the size of the challenge as far as renewables are concerned. Carbon sequestration is not a proven technology. The only technology currently operating at multiple tens of gigawatts level is nuclear. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that we don't need renewables and we don't need carbon sequestration. The size of the challenge is so great, we need every tool in the toolbox. But I sat in a meeting with Sir John Beddington at the time when he was reporting to the Prime Minister, turned to me and said, so we need 130 gigawatts of nuclear. Can we do it? And I said, well, if you look at some countries, the grid sizes that they have, it is potentially possible that we could look at very significant expansion of nuclear. Just to give you a little bit more of a flavour for this is some work that we do in the National Nuclear Laboratory, which models what would our country's energy mix look like as far as nuclear is concerned. You can see that where we're coming from at the moment, in the time frame of around about 2020, is, I'm afraid, we're at the bottom of the graph. And what we need to look at is a significant build programme of light water reactors if we're going to hit 75 gigawatts. Now, the government got very nervous about saying we're going to go for 130 gigawatts. They thought that's just going to scare the horses. So we'll pull it down to about 75 gigawatts. Still roughly 10 times what we have today is going to be required. This shows you the ramp rate that's required as far as nuclear is concerned. It also touches on where we're going to go. What sort of technology are we going to require to deliver that ramp up associated with nuclear? Where we come from in nuclear is actually, and this is where government also potentially gets things a bit back to front. They start by thinking, okay, so we need to build nuclear reactors. Not necessarily right. The first thing you need to think about is, what's the fuel cycle? Where's the fuel going to come from? What are you going to do with that fuel afterwards? What infrastructure do you require to handle all the fuel that's going to be required? We must build nuclear reactors to start with, but we need to think about fuel cycle. And some of the work that we do shows you need to consider all these aspects associated with economics, finance, the technology options, the fuel supply, the infrastructure that's required. I'm not going to go through the list, but you can see there's an awful lot of things that you need to think about if you're going to go for a massive ramp rate of nuclear. The punchline on this slide is all that capability to do that and think that through sits in Cumbria. It sits here to be able to help the government to address each of those aspects, not just the build, but also the finance associated with it, the future fuel cycle strategy, the infrastructure that's required. It's all here. When it comes to looking at building new nuclear reactors, they're going to take place around the country at the existing sites, and you can see roughly where they are. And of course, we do have the additional site associated with NuGen. It is highly unlikely that in other parts of the country new nuclear sites will be found. We have to utilise the sites that we have. They are a significant strategic asset to the United Kingdom. Sellafield is a major strategic asset in terms of the site. And this shows that in terms of delivering the support to those reactors, there's only one place in the country which is absolutely unique where you can do that. You can build your reactors at other locations, but all the support for them, the lifeblood of those reactors, needs to come from only one place, and that's here. You can't make those reactors function unless you have the capability and the infrastructure sitting here in West Cumbria. And just listed there are some of the challenges and opportunities we have associated with this future energy policy. As I say, it's not just new nuclear build. We have a whole range of issues that we need to think about to support the infrastructure for the nuclear fuel cycle. Just to give you a flavour of the size of the nuclear capability that exists within Cumbria, I'm not going to go through the numbers, but you can see the number of employees, the wages and the support to supply chain companies as well. We have a significant number of very high quality jobs that involve employees based locally in the region that also utilise supply chain services. What we need to look at now is not just nuclear at the centre, but how do we support the wider economy, how do we support the small to medium enterprises, and how do we support local businesses? What does this mean to the man on the street in West Cumbria? That's what we need to get right and articulate. It's not just about these large nuclear organisations. Just to give you a flavour, actually, of the fact that the organisations that will be central to helping to articulate this policy for the United Kingdom are located here, again, in West Cumbria, and are all located here, actually. First of all, we have a unique heritage. Nuclear power effectively started within this region, so 50 years plus of heritage. Headquarters for some of the UK's major nuclear organisations, the NDA, the Sellafield for National Nuclear Lab, the Skills Academies here as well. And as I mentioned, these strategic sites that are absolutely imperative to deliver energy policy. Sellafield, the site at Drigg for low-level waste, and indeed, if we think about it from the defence point of view, the Borough shipyards as well. Virtually impossible to replicate that capability elsewhere in the country. And you can see we also have expertise with regards to transport, commercial expertise as well, and of course we're welcoming the arrival of NuGen into the region. Subject matter expertise is essential. It's not just about having the sites and the infrastructure, you need the people. And subject matter experts are a key aspect with that. And what we see is the involvement of some of the leading universities within the country here in West Cumbria. So we have a 5-star academically excellent university in the form of Manchester, the Dalton Cumbria facility, set up just down the road here. UCLan and their involvement in nuclear, and as Mike touched on, the links with nuclear medicine as well, is something that they're very interested in. And of course the involvement of the University of Cumbria, again another essential player. And all these universities are able to work together and fulfil a different part of the academic supply chain. And also, of course, we have unrivaled access to the facilities. As a National Nuclear Laboratory, we operate about £1.5 billion worth of nuclear research infrastructure that can handle anything in the nuclear fuel cycle. Spent fuel, high active waste, plutonium, etc. And again, they cannot be replicated, but people will come here and universities will come here to access that capability. It's not just about the high-end skills. We need to ensure that we put in place all the skills associated with the skills pyramid and the skills triangle. So we need to make sure we have world-class capability in providing apprentice training, foundation degree courses, etc. And you can see from the list here that we already have a number of those jigsaw pieces are being put in place in the region as well. The capability, as I mentioned earlier, goes wider than just the nuclear players and also the academic and training players. It's about the supply chain. How do we involve small to medium enterprises and local businesses in this whole opportunity that we have as a region? And that's central to this. It's not just about some big organisations that sit behind fences with police guns and dogs. We've got to make sure that this is engaged and integrated with the wider economy within the region, and that everybody feels that benefit. Clearly, as I mentioned, the workforce has unbridled experience with regards to its capability in nuclear, and a real asset is it has a supportive community that understands, lives with, works with nuclear. That, again, is a unique asset in its own right and something that we should celebrate. And one of the things I often look at is the fact that world-class people move to world-class areas to do world-class activities. Recently, a couple of years ago, I took Prince Andrew round the University of Manchester's Dalton Nuclear Institute. And I thought I'd just perhaps put it into context and explain some of the history. So I looked back at where Manchester came from and the wealth in the 1900s, that it decided to take on Cambridge as a university. So it set up Nuclear Physics Research Department in 1900 to rival the Cavendish Laboratory at Cambridge. And in setting up that laboratory, it attracted some world-class names in nuclear. If you're a bit of a nuclear physics geek, and apologies I am, but these names mean an awful lot to you. These won Nobel Prizes for all the work that they did on nuclear. And in fact, of course, we had John Dalton, which Dalton, we named it after John Dalton, coming from Eaglesfield, just down the road as well. But that just shows you build world-class facilities and infrastructure. People travel globally to go there. Look at CERN in Geneva, unique asset. The Joint European Torus in Oxfordshire, where I worked as well, tracks people from all over the world. You can extend this concept further. Middle East. People go to the Middle East because they see it's a world centre of excellence as far as the oil industry is concerned. California. Why do people go to California? Because they see the opportunity that they can engage with a vibrant community that can look to exploit business opportunities. We have a sister laboratory that we work with, Lawrence Livermore Lab in California. The market capitalization of the businesses spun out of that laboratory are worth $9 billion in the local regional economy. That's because of the bright ideas that have come out of the laboratory, people have spun out. And you say, well, could we do that in Cumbria? Could we follow that sort of model? And there's nothing effectively stopping us. And I know that Jamie Reid talks about the Silicon Valley concept. I talk about it as well, because we've got all the bits of the jigsaw that would enable us to spin out and diversify our economy. So, delivery. What is it that we need to consider if we are going to help the government realise its aims and aspirations associated with energy, defence, policy objectives? Collectively, as far as the region is concerned, we need to think about not just the nuclear side of it, but what infrastructure are we going to need? How are we going to house the people? NewGen and the build programme is going to require 6,000 people coming here. How are they going to be housed? What infrastructure do we need to support them in terms of road, rail and IT? We need to think about all these activities. We need to go further as far as our training and education establishment requirements are concerned. What's the workforce of the future going to look like? We need to start to get this right now, ready to deliver what we need to do in 2050 plus. How are we going to involve local businesses? And Rob talked earlier about that, and it's really key aspect as far as engaging the broader set of SMEs and local businesses in the region. How are we going to attract investment and finance to come here to support what we need to do? And this isn't a case of us saying, look, we've had nuclear for so many years to Whitehall that you owe us one in terms of living with it. It's where we go to Whitehall and we say, we understand what you need to do in terms of your energy policy. This is how we can help you. But to do that is going to require the necessary investment. Diversification is absolutely key. As I mentioned at the start, it's not all about nuclear, but it's how we have something that we can build on as far as the sector is concerned, where there's a lot of science, technology, engineering, and innovative skills, project management skills, finance, legal skills. How can we diversify that lot broader into the wider economy? You can count on one hand the number of places around the world that effectively can do this, and I think I've been to most of them to understand the nuclear capability that they have. What we need to do is to raise awareness with a single collective voice as to what we have in the region and ensure that we attract the brightest and best to come here. It's what I call the Los Alamos effect. There's a laboratory, another one, it's a sister of ours, in New Mexico, that's called Los Alamos National Lab, and people go there just to get 2 years on their CV to say, I've worked at Los Alamos. That's what I want National Nuclear Lab to be like in the future. People will come here, will come to the region, and I can say to the government, I've attracted the world's best people to come here to support delivery of this mission. And they come here and say, I've got on my on my CV that I worked at National Nuclear Lab, or I worked at Sellafield, but I've been to Cumbria, and that will mean something on their CV. If they stay or move on, it becomes a fluid economy. We need to ensure that we attract internationally the involvement of key countries, and we already have a strong link with China, and some of that came out last week with the Premier's visit. And my view associated with this is we should be thinking about this as what Saudi Arabia is to the oil industry, this region is to nuclear. And so that sets out potentially a really big vision for us. So, having set the scene, what is the Centre of Nuclear Excellence? There is no single organisation that is able to effectively articulate this to government, stakeholders and internationally. That's where we have come together as a collection of organisations involving Sellafield, NDA and a range of others that I'll show in a minute, to basically have that single voice that is able to set out a coherent plan and a coherent strategy as far as what's required to support delivery of government's aims and objectives. So we have a number of organisations already involved, and this is growing. And apologies if I've not got your logo up on this slide and you are involved. But basically, I'm not going to, having a day job of running the National Lab, waste my time on initiatives that feels like I'm pushing rocks uphill. And this is not one of those. This has a lot of momentum and drive and energy and desire behind it from all those partners and indeed others. They can all see it and feel it as far as the region is concerned. So for me, this is going somewhere, and I think it's great that all these organisations have come together to support it. Some of the things that we've achieved so far, we've set up the steering group, we've established a programme office that we and other organisations are supporting, subgroups looking at different aspects of diversification, benefit to SMEs and local business, infrastructure requirements, etc. We're working out, it's early days for us, what our vision, mission and objectives actually are. And all this is being supported by a number of organisations, I showed those logos earlier, that are contributing in kind. We've agreed that we're working closely with the LEP, and it was mentioned earlier about the four-pronged attack associated with that. One of those is nuclear. we see Cone as being the delivery vehicle to support the LEP in achieving that prong with regards to nuclear. We've already had some success associated with the rail franchise, understanding the skills gap within the region as far as nuclear is going to require going forward, and then raising the awareness with government over the nuclear capability. This kindly came in. Rory sent this to me the other day. This is Andrew Leadsom, who is the Minister for Energy within the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and this was quoted in the House of Commons. So we are already on the radar map, which is a fantastic start, and we intend to build on that significantly. The comms and the marketing and the engagement is an essential aspect with raising the profile and awareness. Because we're not alone, actually, on wanting to set out this vision. We know that the southwest of the country sees itself as a centre of nuclear excellence and is making a ploy for that, given it has Hinkley Point C. But my view is I'm prepared to bench press against any other region in terms of the capability that we have here, and I'll quite happily stand up for Cumbria. So what are we doing next? As I mentioned, we need to really articulate to stakeholders, government and further afield, with regards to the role that Cumbria plays in delivering the policy objectives. We need to effectively turn these ideas into what actually are we going to do, what are the programmes of activity to support this, and that's ongoing. Also developing the case for future missions. Whilst we've got new nuclear build here, we need to think about what comes next. What do we need if we're going to really achieve the energy and defence aims and objectives? We need to attract additional investment, but then as Rob talked about, the link to the Northern Powerhouse. For me, I do see that we are an integral part of it. I see that Manchester as a major hub is only 2.5 hours away. There is no competition as far as I'm concerned. Some of these other nuclear facilities around the world, which I can count on one hand, that can do what we can do, some of their sites are, you have to drive across them. It takes 2 hours to drive across them. To put it into context, I've been to the sites in the United States, and it takes 2 hours just to cross the site. In 2 hours, we can be from the heart of our nuclear industry into a major city that attracted Premier Xi last week. And George Osborne absolutely made the connection, and you may pick up the announcement that came out last week with regards to nuclear, strong support from the government, Northern Powerhouse, strong support from the Chancellor, and the links with China. And that resulted in a £50 million programme announced jointly between the UK and China, funded by the Treasury last week. So that gives you an indication we're sitting in an absolute sweet spot as far as government is concerned. In order to succeed at this, I think there's really 3 things that we need to do. We've got to collaborate, we need to work together, and we have to pool our resources if we are to make this happen. Thanks very much for listening, and please do get involved if you can.
Thank you very much, Paul. When I decided to run for election to be the Mayor of Copeland, I'd done so as a local resident who just believed Copeland could be better than what it is, and there was a huge level of potential. And I came into the role with real optimism that could be achieved. 6 months down the line and sitting there listening to Paul speak, the optimism that was there in May when I got elected is just enhanced. When you hear about the innovation, the expertise, the key role the nuclear industry has in the UK and the spin-off opportunities that come with that, this area, the world really is our oyster. And I think Paul encapsulated that quite well, when he talked about raising awareness. And today is about raising awareness, of getting the message out to the wider world of what is happening in this part of the world, because I think there is still some people who don't quite get just what the opportunity is and the scale of what's going on here. Paul, again, he talked about collaborative partnerships and working together. And as the council, as an organisation, I said earlier, I don't see it as a political movement. I see it as a facilitator for exactly everything that Paul's talked about. You know, the innovation of NNL. I sat there and I was inspired listening to that, and I heard him say it all 2 weeks before. So, you know, sitting, you know, for a second time listening to that, it's quite inspiring and gives you the optimism of where we were going. In terms of corn, I'm quite proud of the part that Copeland Council has played in bringing that together, because Copeland Council was the facilitator of corn. Copeland Council is what brought all those member components to corn, and I say Copeland Council when I should probably really be saying our executive director, Pat Graham, who's the driving force behind bringing that together. Unfortunately, Pat can't be here today. I wish she could, and she could get the recognition she deserves for what she's achieved in bringing that together. And I'm sure Paul and Rory and all the other people who were part of that would endorse exactly what I've said. And that's where I see the role of Copeland, of facilitating the huge opportunity that business people, innovators and investors have got in this area at this current time. Our last speaker before lunch and before we go to a question panel of all the speakers is Robert Armour from NewGen. NewGen are entrusted with the new build that is going to bring, you know, so much prosperity into the area. You know, over the last few weeks and months, I've had an opportunity to engage quite a lot with NewGen and several members of the staff. And I can only speak as I find, and my impressions are that NewGen want to make a positive impact in Copeland, and they want to leave a positive, lasting legacy. If that wasn't what I felt, that isn't what I would say, but it is a genuine feeling of every engagement that I've had with NewGen is that they want their impact and the legacy to be positive. Please can you give a warm welcome to Robert Armour.
Thank you all. I'm here representing NewGen. I'm not on my own. We've got Catherine, Dan and Fergus here, so I don't know everybody in the room by any means. Please do come and see us on the stand. Please come and see us over lunch. And can I just ask Dan and Catherine and Fergus to identify themselves as targets for anybody who wants to. Oh, they're all sitting together, goodness me. Thanks very much. Thanks to Mike. He's disappeared. I think pulling this conference together in 5 weeks is quite an achievement. To get a sellout in that time is amazing. To do it and manage 2 weeks holiday and delegate it to your staff in between is even better, and I wish I planned it as well. I'm conscious, Rob said to me, it's nice to come to a conference where at least half the faces you don't know. For me, that's more, but for Rob, who knows a lot of people. So bear with me if I just briefly take you through what NewGen is for those. Some of you may have seen it before, and some of you, hopefully, I'll just put it in slightly different terms. Starting with what we are. There are 3 nuclear consortia going forward in the UK at this point in time. The one that's focused on the biggest nuclear construction new build project in Europe, and actually the biggest outside Asia, is NewGen. It's made up of 2 groups. ENGIE, which used to be GDF Suez, it owns Tractable, it's an operator, it has a fleet of nuclear stations in Belgium, and it brings to this an operator's skill. And on the other half of the project, Toshiba, a large Japanese conglomerate which is famed for building plant and turbines. It owns Westinghouse, which is the leading provider of new nuclear based in America. So we very consciously put together those 2 parts to give the balance, so that we weren't just all the people selling the reactor technology, we brought the operator skills, we created the balance. That's going to be important to take forward a project to financing, because people want the checks and balances between the full model there. We are delighted and proud of the technology. We think the AP1000 technology we're bringing here is the best of the new build technology being brought to the UK. We think we will build a better station, and that's not to knock Hinkley in any way. It's just we're proud of the technology we have, and we think it's a genuine evolution into Gen 3. What does a nuclear project involve? You've seen in the last week a lot of media coverage on Hinkley. And I think we're all cheering from the sidelines to see a project getting very close to FID, getting China and France and the UK all signed on to taking that one forward. It's important for the industry that Hinkley goes ahead, that we get that first nuclear project for since Sizewell moving forward in the UK. It has been a long slog. I was still working at EDF in 2007 when they were starting on that project. Here we are in 2015, coming through to the point of financial investment decision, and the plan is to have the station on the bars and running in the mid-2020s. It is a long slog, and it involves a whole variety of things. So I think there's an expectation issue here that as we build this in Cumbria, it's going to take a long time to get all the pieces in place. That is good. In a sense, it gives us time to build the skills that are going to be necessary to run the plant, to build into the supply chain, and so forth. But it is sometimes frustrating that these things do take quite a long time. And where are we at the moment? We're finishing off the design assessment. One of the things that has extended the projects for new nuclear stations over the past is people have a tendency to rush forward and start building them before they've completed the design. And usually they then change it. And that results in claims and costs and overruns. We are trying to avoid that. Clearly, there will be adaptations to bring a design that is currently being built in the US and in China into the UK. But as far as we can, we want to bottom that down. We're designing the whole engineering, procurement, construction contract and the risk allocation that comes with that to try and get that right so that we have a financeable project that we can take to the market and that we can get something that works and creates the right drivers on all the different parts of it. And we have to negotiate with government because the basis on which you take forward power stations of this size in the UK is you're negotiating an offtake, a contract for difference. So that has to be done. At the moment, the government has been focused inevitably on getting Hinkley over the line. We now move on to getting the next projects over the line. There are a substantial need for new projects in the UK. The coal stations that we have are retiring. Most of them will be gone by 2023, if not before. The existing nuclear fleets will be gone by the mid-20s to the end of the 20s for the rest of them. And that leaves a hole where we don't have enough low-carbon generation to fill that. And that's why we're going to need the new nuclear fleets. So we are working to pull all that together to get to a financial investment decision in 2018. We don't intend to take as long as Hinkley. That's not to knock Hinkley. It's just we can learn from their groundbreaking and move through, we hope, the thing faster. And some of the things that had to be knocked through, we can hopefully go on the back of that and then take this forward. We, again, will be building this one through, aiming for being on the bars in the mid-2020s. It's not quite sure which of the three projects will be there first. It's not quite a race, but we'd like it to be, and we'd love this one to be there first as well, but that's not a prediction. So, where does that take us for Cumbria? Very deliberately on this slide, we have 5 organisations based in Cumbria, because we want Cumbria to be a major part of what we're building here. We want the Cumbria supply chain to be absolutely intrinsic to what we're doing at Newgen and Moorside. The first things that we've been doing at this point in time, since Toshiba came in June last year, we spent a lot of time looking at the site to make sure it was fit for purpose, that what we were buying could take the reactors that are going on it. And over the last year, we've done a lot of evaluation on the site and confirmed that. We then paid £59 million. That gives us the option. It doesn't actually buy us the land. It gives us the option to continue investigating the site and planning on that one. And the land will be far more expensive by the time we have certified that it's absolutely fit for the purpose that we're doing. And that money will go to the NDA and government in due course. We've been taking forward the first stage of the consultation, the DCO. And we'll talk briefly about DCO Stage 1 and DCO Stage 2, which is coming up. And today, we're particularly talking about how do we engage and motivate and incentivize the West Cumbria supply chain. So if I just start with DCO Stage 1. It was a remarkably engaged consultation here. 10-week program, 1,800 people through the visitor centres and the exhibitions that we did, 750 submissions and comments into that one, and many cases very informed. This is an informed constituency. The questions that you are getting in Cumbria about nuclear are different from the questions that they had in West Somerset. And people know what they're talking about. 5 themes probably came out particularly. There was overwhelming support for new nuclear in that. But people focused on the practical issues that they want to see. They were focused, one, on transport. What is it going to do to our communities? What's going to be the impact of bringing in materials and people and so forth? And what we're looking at is a rail-focused strategy more than a road-focused strategy. Something that takes heavy equipment and takes staff in by rail, building a rail spur into the site, trying to take some of the traffic off the roads. Hopefully trying to work with our neighbours to utilise that rail service as well. Maybe actually increase the rail service, who knows. Infrastructure. Same points we heard earlier. The influx of people will put stress onto the infrastructure in West Cumbria. We're looking at peak 6,000 people working on site during construction, 1,000 permanent job during the operational phase, and over the life of it, we're talking about 14,000 to 21,000 jobs, because this is something that is not just going to employ the current generation, we're looking to the next generation, and probably the generation after that. So what does that do? How do we play our part with others in the success story of West Cumbria that is going to require more services and more support and put more strains on the infrastructure? Third one is employment. How do we make sure that Cumbria gets the employment benefit of this? Great to talk about 6,000 jobs. Great to know that there is potential. We heard in the coal sector. We know the NDA is doing a great deal. How do we make sure Cumbria gets those jobs? And that takes you into the whole issue of skills and training, which we were talking about earlier. We launched recently our Bright Sparks initiatives. We're very keen to see the development of colleges in the same way. I know the NDA, NNL have been working on enhancing that. We look at the models from Bridgewater where there's a college there. How do we build the skills that we need to operate these? And at the same time, they are transferable skills for other parts of the nuclear industry in the area. there was a recognition of national need for new nuclear. We kind of talked about that. If we are heading for replacement of existing generation of all types, if we are looking at low carbon, we actually need new nuclear somewhere. And Cumbria has a part to play. And then the next one, really what we're about today, how does the supply chain play into that? How does the supply chain get engaged in this? We can look at the lessons from the renewable industry. One of the difficulties in the development of offshore wind in the UK is it has mushroomed, but none of the turbines have been built in this country. How do we avoid that for this project and what's happening in West Cumbria? So I mentioned that we paid our money and we got the land option, and that allows us to get on site. And over the next year, we will be doing even more digging and even more evaluation, because once you're on there, you start looking in detail about layout and rock structure, what is under you, and what you can do, where you can site the units. And you have to evaluate it with considerable care. And that's what we're doing. So looking at the immediate future, we're talking about geological, hydrological, offshore, looking at where pipe tracks might be going, the seabed, meteorological, the weather, impacts on that, flooding risk, sites quite well above sea level in that. But there is going to be a lot of stuff going on there on the site and adjacent to the site. All of that investigation work has to be done to prepare and underpin the safety cases and the planning application. All of it will require servicing. If we are going offshore, we're going to have to hire craft to take us offshore to do the surveys. In supporting these surveys, there will be a lot of consumables that we have to buy in the local economy. So there's a variety of things we will be doing in the immediate future, even at the investigation phase and the characterization. And the spin-offs, of course, from this. As we scrutinize the area, we find things that you might not others. There's a turtle up there. We didn't know that turtles were that far north, and this is a pretty rare one. So there will be other things that come out there which actually then have a spin-off into tourism and attraction and so forth. We're going into the next phase of consultation in 2016. There's a lot to think about, and the first thing is I'm not in a position to say what that will look like, partly because we've just finished stage one. And you take the big issues that came out of stage one and you start applying them into your thinking for stage two. So we have the site characterization that's on the one hand that says where you can sit things, and there's the issues that people are focused on. But what are we particularly focused on? We're focused on regeneration. We're focused on legacy. There's a lot of places you can learn from saying, if we build something, if we're going to have to site construction accommodation, how do you deal with that? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? How do you create something which is then useful to the community going forward? We are going to be here for the long term. We actually want something that works for the long term for Cumbria in that. How do you integrate it so that it isn't separate workers and the community? How do you make this something that's joined up and part of the community and sensitive to the community? And then how do you deal with the skills issue? We want the jobs to come to Cumbria. We want to create the supply chain of people into Cumbria. So we are going to have to provide the training and the skills enrichment that allows people to take the job now and looking forward, that allows those that are in schools today to have a job and a career prospect that allows them skilled, well-paid jobs in the area without having to go away. And that brings you back to working with the schools, colleges, and creating that resource. And it's a resource which a variety of the employers here will need. So, the things we have to do, we're going to have to, before we can build, get a nuclear site license. We're going to have to move forward on our engineering, procurement and construction contract. We're going to have to design something financeable and go and test that in the market. And we are aiming to try and get to that point by FID in 2018. And then from 2018, we have the hard job beyond that of getting the project up as a construction project. 60% of that project is open to the UK supply chain. It's open to everyone here. There are some areas in a nuclear project where the UK just can't supply it at this point. We haven't done forgings for 500-ton pressure vessels for a long time. That sort of thing tends to be done in certain specialised facilities, usually in France or the Far East or such. But there's an awful lot we can do and that we can focus on, and that people here can play a part in. We're looking at the stuff in the near term, and we're looking at the longer term. And what we want to prepare businesses for is the requirements that we have. We're very much focused on quality and reliability. If you're building a nuclear station, you have to get it right. The great thing is West Cumbria is used to dealing with the nuclear industry. It's used to dealing with the culture that we have here. But there are a lot of businesses that will look at new build and say, we could do something in it. And part of our job is to help those businesses to get fit for supplying the nuclear industry. And it is different. It does have requirements, but that doesn't mean it's insuperable and we can't make it easier. So what are we talking about? It's really important that we meet quality standards. Again, the lessons from why stations overrun and projects fail is in many cases that suppliers were not used to the standards, that people were trying things for the first time, that when they built them for the first time, they didn't do it right first time. You then had to do rework. All of which goes to cost and risk and certainty. And the one thing we are clear on is that the Treasury wants to make sure that what it pays us in the offtake agreement is the lowest possible price it can to get a competitive electricity supply. So we want to work with the supply chain to make it more certain, to de-risk it. We have to have the safety culture that the nuclear industry needs. And that isn't just us. It's all the people who are engaged with us. It's a really important part of it. But again, West Cumbria is used for that. And we're really focused on the sustainability of what we generate and the power plant, but the sustainability of the supply chain and the sustainability of the whole project. So we'd love you to work with us. How do you find out about that one? Well, we have a portal, which we've recently launched. Rob was talking about the lessons from the portal in West Somerset. We're trying to build on that. We're trying to get a point where everybody can see what is happening with the project, what are the opportunities of the project, but also linking through to the things that I'm talking about. How do you get fit for supplying in the project? How do you get together with others to deal with the opportunities that are coming through? You'll find that at supplytomoorside.co.uk. Have a look at it. Please register for it. See what you're interested in doing. And over the period, we will try and make sure that those who want to commit to the standards that we need for the supply chain actually get there and come with us, because we'd love you to be there. So I hope you'll come with us on this journey. I hope you'll be a part of making Moorside happen. Ideally, making Moorside happen first, of the projects, but let's see how we get there. Please go to the portal and please chin any one of the New Gen people who are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. Rob talked a lot in the presentation there about the consultation process that takes place. You know, the cynics of the world, you know, would usually tell you that a consultation is just lip service, just a process to be got through to get where they were going to go anyway. My overriding feeling in all dealings with New Gen is this is a genuine consultation process with the community of Copeland and Cumbria at large. Well demonstrated, you know, as part of my role as elected mayor, I go out to and run public meetings in all our towns around the area and listen to what the voters and the people of Copeland tell us. And a couple of months ago, when the consultation, some of the first consultation documents for New Gen came out, I was down in Milham and I was asked once, twice, maybe 100 times during the meeting, do they not know Milham exists and is part of Copeland? The next day I met with Tom Sampson and I raised the concerns with him of the people of Milham, and his reaction on the spot was, I will go there. Not I will send somebody there. I will have a look. I'll look it up on a map. What he committed to do was to visit Milham. Now, this is a guy who sometimes his appointments are in different countries, in different days of the week, never mind different towns, and he committed nearly a full day and took the New Gen team with him. You know, some of the Milham councillors that are here who help, I can see Fee and Doug Wilson there, two of them at the back, who helped facilitate that day, and he visited the rail links at Milham, the Milham Network Centre. He went down to Havering, he went down to Milham Pier, he looked at land opportunities and took the time personally as a chief executive of a multinational company to go down and look what Milham had to offer. And the feedback was positive, and Milham, which is very much as much part of our community as Whitehaven, Egremont and Cleatamua, is now very much in the thought process of how New Gen take things forward. That to me is a genuine consultation process. You know, there's other things when New Gen comes, it's got to plug into the national grid, and that will lead to planning for pylons, and my add to the consultation or to the debate is that we live in the Lake District National Park in one of the most beautiful parts of the whole country, and in other areas of national beauty it's care has been taken with underground cabling to preserve the areas of natural beauty. You know, what I would say, well, whatever areas of natural beauty that you've got wherever you are in the country, I can show you one that's better. It's here in Copeland, it's here in the Lake District National Park, and I would expect that any consultation treats our national park with the same respect of national places and national beauty around the rest of the country. We deserve no less as a community, and as a council we will fight tooth and nail to make sure, again, we get the best for the people of our community. Without any further ado, could I ask Rob and Paul to go to the table and we'll take some questions. Could I also ask Stephen Lancaster for Penrith Farmers and Kids also to join us on the table at the front, and up to lunch we'll have some questions from the audience of our speakers. So Paul, Rob, if you could... Just before we kick off with the questions, while I'm up here, I'll take the opportunity to ask the first one. We've heard from the three of the guys. Stephen Lancaster's joined them from Penrith Farmers and Kids. Stephen, in the last 14 months has opened a premise in Whitehaven on King Street. Stephen, could I sort of ask you to sort of articulate best you can why you brought your business to Whitehaven and what you're seeing in terms of migrants coming into the area and the opportunity for future development in Copeland? Just press the button, yeah.
All right, we're on now. Great. Welcome. Hello, everybody. We have 6 estate agencies across the county, primarily in the CA postcodes. We already had an established office at Cockermouth, and we saw the opportunity in Whitehaven, already having a strong economy. And so we saw the opportunity. Blockbuster came up. We grabbed it. We invested in Whitehaven. We revamped the property in 6 weeks. And we got ourselves going. We've been trading from the 10th of November last year. And on checking this morning, we have 87 properties in stock. We've done incredibly well in our first year, and we're incredibly proud of what we've achieved. The people of Whitehaven and Copeland have supported us, and it's doing really, really well. We do have a lack of rental properties, which I think is probably problematic across the area and indicative of the way the local economy works. But quite interesting, after our brief discussion, that I had a look at where our purchases are coming from. And quite interestingly, 20% of the stock we have sold are from people from outside Copeland, people moving to the area. And I cross-referenced that with our other offices, and Keswick is a bit of an anomaly anyway, but with the general offices, it's usually 10%. So what we're seeing is twice the influx as we normally see in other areas. And I think with the advent of a potential nuclear new build, we can only really see that going up. We're also taking a lot of inquiries from regional house builders, national house builders, about the potential within Copeland, and they're ready to go. The green light is on.
Yeah, and I think that's a great message to go out. The green light is on, and people looking move into the area, they're more than welcome, and it will be actively encouraged. Can we start taking questions from the audience, please? Has anybody got a question they'd like to pose to our panel? Brian.
Paul, with the advent of Moorside and with the construction jobs, what provisions are taking place currently with a view to ensuring that we've got the amount of people available to go on that site with the CSCS card? Because at present they can't get on the site unless they've got the necessary qualifications. I'm not on about the bit on the radio last week where under the auspices of the CITB, 3 training facilities were helping people to get the qualification, and a major employer said that they're actually putting people's lives at risk. So the reality of the situation is, what are we doing at present to ensure we've got local people? Because I have a good friend in this audience, David Banks, and David for a lot of years has said, not everybody's got the qualifications to go on that site as a physicist or an engineer. And people are maybe good with their hands and they want the opportunity to get this qualification. The other question to Paul was for the infrastructure. You mentioned housing, road and rail and IT. A lot of years ago when provisions were talked about Thorpe, there was a discussion took place with Jamie Reid's predecessor about the advent of a port facility off Sellafield. And you mentioned about the question of the rail infrastructure. Far too often we've seen it blocked as a result of heavy rain, etc. Would it not be more beneficial to discuss that with a port facility? We need the rail infrastructure to ensure that we've got the whole aspect of the economy opening up. And we can't do without the rail as well as the roads. But far too often we've got an ideal opportunity. We're surrounded by water. Would it not be appropriate to give consideration for a port facility to get the equipment coming onto site? And finally, if you allow me the opportunity, where's the steel going to come from? We've seen what's happened now with the steelworks closing. Is it going to be foreign imported steel, which is not as the quality which we require, what's being made in Britain? And the opportunity for a facility at Moorside, I personally believe it should be British steel for a British company for the British people. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the questions. I note that there's a number of references to Moorside, so I'll probably let Robert pick those up, but I'll speak generally in response to your questions. I couldn't agree more with everything that you've said, and that's really why the Centre of Nuclear Excellence has been set up, because there isn't now a single voice as far as the industry is concerned that's able to address and tackle the problems that you've raised, being skills, infrastructure, and then key supply chain such as steel. So the intention of bringing all the key organisations together in the Centre of Nuclear Excellence is that we can articulate exactly what you have just said, which I couldn't agree with more. The difficulty I think that we've experienced is that until now, there have been sort of like a number of large organisations. So 10 years ago plus, like we had BNFL, which effectively spearheaded the direction of travel and was sort of like large enough and looked after the majority of the UK's nuclear programme here at Sellafield, that it was able to set the course of direction on things that you've mentioned, such as skills, infrastructure and supply chain support. What's happened since then is we've seen a fragmentation of the UK nuclear industry, such that there isn't one single organisation that is able to fully articulate what you've just said and then engage with government and other stakeholders to say we need to ensure that we have the skills provision locally to get local people trained up and working on site. The infrastructure, what we don't want is Sellafield looking at resolving the infrastructure separately from Nugen doing it, separately from ourselves doing it, separately from Borough doing it. This is where we're getting together to say, look, we all need infrastructure here, so let's solve this problem. And you're absolutely right with key industries. I would love to see the fact that that indigenously steel could be seen to support the delivery of these programs. But unless we all act together, then effectively we get sort of picked off almost. So what you've said just fully articulates why we need the Centre of Nuclear Excellence. But I'll probably let Robert pick up on the new gen points.
Yeah, look, there's a lot. We'd love to buy British Steel. I'm watching the new Fourth Crossing being built, and it's not being built with British source steel. It's a real shame. We will do everything we can to allow the UK supply chain to compete in this and give it every chance. There are procurement rules that we have to follow, but where we can make it possible and help the UK to come up and fulfill that 60% of the supply chain, we will. On the harbour aspect of it, one of the parts of the design is we will be building a marine landing facility. It won't necessarily be a full-scale harbour. Sellafield currently has a marine landing facility. We'll be building, we think, another one just slightly along from that. The rail, again, we're thinking of that heavily to bring in people and avoid the road transport if we can, and create a frequency and a station and a link to up to the site. There are problems with the rail itself in terms of the bridges, and that which will limit the amount and the load that you can take from say Whitehaven or Workington. And yeah, I mean, one of the first things we did was to set up a cooperation agreement with our neighbours at Sellafield, because we're all having to work together. We're all facing many of the same and shared issues that we've got to try and address. And solving it for one but not doing it for the other, when we've got an opportunity to do it together, far better.
Thanks, guys. Raymond, have you got a question now?
My main question is relating to the supply chain. We've seen in the past, some of us that were still here, around here in the 70s during the previous developments, a lot of bad experiences by small businesses, very small businesses, who get in trouble getting payment from bigger suppliers and bigger players in development and the bigger subcontractors. And there was a reluctance after that of some small businesses going into the supply chain for Sellafield, for example. Although I do know that that's been cured, I think you should do some more publicity in saying to small businesses that
you'll be a partner and that you will be paid promptly, because there's a lot of wood is there. The other thing I want to mention is relating to, you mentioned infrastructure, but no one mentioned other things on the infrastructure, like doctors and dentists in our health service. Our hospital is under threat at the moment, under dire pressure, because of moving the services out of the area to Carlisle. And I would like to see more said about infrastructure development in that area. Thank you.
Any guys want to comment?
Yeah, look, I was going to say, in that I pointed to DCO Stage 2 and how we can do things better. I think there's a real opportunity for people to engage then and flag up a whole of the variety of the things that we should do. That will range from your views on how we deal with the legacy, your views on where we put facilities, support and so forth in the area. But actually, again, highlighting bigger issues, including the one that came out there, pressure on the infrastructure, what's going to happen to hospital services. It's not just hospital services. As you say, it's all the things that lie behind that. And flagging up that these things have to be tackled if we have a major construction project, if Sellafield have a major requirement for that, if we have other things in the area. So please do highlight these things. Do highlight them if you can with your suggested solution to them, so that we can, in turn, work with things we can do with our partners, and things we can do with local and central government.
You want to say something, Rob?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on the supply chain issue, because it's a very important point, actually. And one of the points I was trying to make in my opening piece was really the work that we do need to do, both in helping businesses upskill and put the systems and processes in place to be able to compete and operate themselves efficiently. But also I think there's a role for us in championing any issues that come out of that. I'm not sure whether we had that infrastructure going back into the days of the 70s and Thorpe. Certainly I wasn't doing the job I'm doing, and I don't think we had Beck in place. But from the Chamber of Commerce's point of view, it's absolutely our space. And it is a part of our role as part of the community on behalf of businesses to make sure that fair play actually plays through. But I'll go back also to my point about contracting. There is this issue. If we're going to put innovation in and we're going to get sustainability, it has to be written in the contracts from the very top, and the space has to be created for that to happen, because that will give us the diversification. But we do, as I'll say again, as an organisation, we will play our part in helping business understand how to operate in that space and give them the support if issues come up.
Yes, Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Again, fully agree with the points that have been raised, and through the Centre of Nuclear Excellence, although it's very early days for us, so I've only been in chair of this for the past few months. These are the exact points that we want to hear and see what we can do collectively to address them. On things like supply chain, I'm conscious that it is difficult for SMEs and non-nuclear small businesses to get involved in understanding how to contract with nuclear for a number of reasons. One, it can be, well, what are the standards that nuclear work to? And that's where Robert mentioned the Fit for Nuclear programme, which helps organisations understand what they need to do to engage with nuclear at the right standards. And also, as far as procurement is concerned, to make sure that large nuclear players aren't holding up through bureaucratic sort of processes, being able to pay readily small to medium enterprises. And I know in my organisation, my chairman challenges me at every board meeting to make sure that we are able to pay small to medium enterprises and local businesses as rapidly as we possibly can. And we heard last week BAE Systems looking at how they basically procure on credit cards as much as they possibly can because of the speed that the local suppliers benefit from that. And Rob here, Rob Johnson, works closely with us as far as the Centre of Nuclear Excellence is concerned to ensure that the Chamber of Commerce and other such parties are appropriately engaged. With regards to the hospital, again, it's the same as the answer to the previous point. We need to recognise that as far as the total infrastructure is required, we can help through the Centre of Nuclear Excellence to be able to articulate a cogent case why the retention and sustainability of the hospital is just absolutely so important, and we can raise with government to say that we are going to need it and it's going to have to grow given what's happening if you wish to achieve your energy and defence policy aims and objectives. So it's early days for us, Centre of Nuclear Excellence, but raising these points absolutely key, and those are the sort of things that we want to ensure that we're able to help with.
Thanks, Paul. Have we got any more questions from the audience? Yes, Andy.
We very much welcome the investment and opportunities highlighted by today's conference. And in partnership with our donors and fund holders, we invested 1.2 million in the local area in the last year. And we definitely, with everyone else in the room, want Copeland to be a place where people choose to live, work and visit. But despite best efforts, we do have people in our communities with low levels of skills, poor health, low attainment in, it's great to hear, what's happening at West Lakes, but some of our schools do have young people not reaching the standards we'd want them to do. And we have lower levels of aspiration and entrepreneurialism that we need to be successful. What assurance can the speakers give that these underlying issues will be addressed during this unprecedented period of investment, and how can organisations like the Community Foundation engage?
Rob?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on that. That is a really, really important point, actually, because it's part of the making sure that the pound sticks all the way down. I think one of the areas that we will do some work on with partners is around the service sector and the opportunity from the service sector, and whether we can help that sector develop and create new market opportunities. And I'll give one really simple example, but it sort of encapsulates it, really. A couple of years ago, we helped a lady into business, and her business was very simply an ironing business. She said that it was a life-changing move for her. It was a major change in her perception of herself in her community. We thought, how can we help this lady take this further? So we took her to a business event where there were some fairly senior operators in the room, and we gave her the opportunity to present that business. Within 6 months, she'd taken on 2 more staff. So I give that as an example, right at the other end of the intellectual end of the high income, high net worth, as a way that we need to think about right the way through all of our operations of how we can engage and create opportunities. And the uniqueness in that is that was an opportunity to present her business to people who would not normally have seen that. And that's the sort of type of thing I was talking about earlier, about looking at things in a very different way and being mindful of members of the community who are setting up businesses, who are taking that really, really important life-changing step, and we do everything to make sure that they get a bite of the cherry.
Rob?
Andy, it's a great question. We talked about the number of jobs that might be there at NewGen. 1,000 jobs in operation, but 6,000 in the construction phase. We've set ourselves an objective of sourcing 2,000 of those jobs at least from Cumbria. How do you do that at a time when Sellafield has also got a whole variety of things on, when the multiplier effect of what we're going to do is going to create other jobs? The guest house I was staying at last night, and I hope they're here today, was talking about how do we deal with an extension to deal with what we see as the opportunity coming, which turns into a whole supply chain issue in itself, which has nothing to do with the nuclear industry, but it's the cascade effect, which will put pressure on jobs. And those jobs will require different skill levels. But the reality is, in order to get to our 2,000, let alone the other ones, we're going to have to be pretty innovative in trying to make sure we can encourage people through, we can upskill them, and we can encourage them in. Now, there are ways that we may not be able to reach everyone, but we certainly are going to try to widen the net there. Otherwise, we're not going to hit that 2,000.
Yes, sorry, I can't see the... Yep, please.
Thank you. I'm Robin Corner. I come from Furness. I'm a visitor from outside Copeland. I'm a member of the A595 Action Group, who is campaigning to upgrade the connection between Borough and Copeland, starting with the worst bottleneck first in Griesbeck. Just as a quick background, in January, Jamie Reid called for a high-tech highway linking Lilyhall, Westlake, Sellafield and Barrow. He and John Woodcock, our local MP, also had a debate in the House of Commons on transport infrastructure West and South Cumbria. Quote, "We are building a 21st century economy on 19th century infrastructure. We can only reach our true potential if significant improvements are made to the A595. Our group was told by the County Council Cabinet they had no money and wouldn't give us money to even study the problem at Griesbeck, our local worst bottleneck. Yet in the north of the county, A66 and A69 were given money in 2014 and then recently in September to look at upgrading those two trunk roads. We don't have that luxury. All the focus to date is between Cumbria and the northeast. And there are Economic Growth Summit, Rob was on the panel there in Barrow in February, that was raised. The LEP is the focus. They are moving very slowly. And my question is, do the businesses in Copeland who will be part of these Olympic scale developments support the need for a proper strategic road connection to Barrow? If so, let's get started now and do the worst first. Will they contribute to our local feasibility study of a bypass at Griesbeck, the worst section, the worst bottleneck in the country, to start the ball rolling to get this whole highway upgraded to where it needs to be for these developments in Barrow, Furness, Ulverston and Copeland? Thank you.
I guess I might come back on that first, given the fact that my name was mentioned. I entirely agree. It's an absolute disgrace. The challenge I think we have, and this isn't a defence of anybody, it's just a fact of life at the moment, everything's built on economic case. And you're absolutely right. There should be a proper piece of study, a piece of work done on the economic case. And I think that economic case needs to take into account the very things I talked about earlier on infrastructure, which is the travel to work, travel to learn. And I think the travel to learn agenda is going to be bigger than possibly we think, and I expect it to reflect what businesses are saying to us on a daily basis. With the complete restructuring of the education system in terms of further and higher education, particularly further education, the colleges will need to work closer together and offer a more unified approach, and that might mean that people are travelling between different areas of the county in a way they didn't do before. So I think you're absolutely right to push. I will take that forward anyway, because I think it's a very important point. There is a cultural connectivity between Furness and West Cumbria. There's also an economic connectivity between Furness and West Cumbria. And as you said, Millom sits in the middle, Mike, and I get a fair lobby from the guys in Millom as well. So I'm happy to take that forward in whatever forum I'm involved in, and look to see if we can help get some at least some more funding behind the study, because I think without an evidence base, it really is difficult to get anything on the table at the moment. One of the things that is happening at the moment, and I've only just joined the LEP board, as has Mike, so we hope to do some good things there, is that there is a devolution deal being discussed with government. That devolution deal will allow Cumbria to have possibly more say in some of the investments that are made than it has previously. And one of those could be around infrastructure. So I think we need to move quickly and make sure that the evidence base exists for the development and what the cost benefits would be of doing that work. But I'm more than happy to take that forward, Mike, as I'm sure you would be as well. So,
Paul, have you got some comment you wish to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I support what Rob has said as far as utilising the LEP and the infrastructure work that's being done. But I think that what we want to do through Cone is to be in a position where to look at some of these infrastructure projects, we are able to articulate the case to government, not from the point of view of either comparison or sort of like infighting in terms of who's got what, but from the point of view of going to government with a cogent argument to say, if we are going to deliver these energy policy and defence policy objectives if that's what the government wants to do, then this is what needs to be deployed and this is what we need help with. And I don't think that we have yet appropriately set forward a cogent argument in that sense. The conversations that I have with Whitehall, I get responses back about Cumbria, and apologies if this is a little bit controversial, but the responses I get back are, one, the view from Whitehall is that the community thinks that the government owes them something because they've put up with 10 years of nuclear, and it's very difficult to get a cogent argument out of Cumbria because there's a lot of intercomparison. So we have got to change the paradigm that we are engaging with Whitehall. We need to do away with that, and we need to say, this is how we help government achieve its aims and objectives. But we can only do that in a cogent argument if we are all coherent about it and we're all pushing in the same direction.
Yeah, I would endorse that, Paul. I think it's about a joined-up approach. And I think Copeland as a community has got to present itself to government as what we can do for the government and what we can add to UK PLC, rather than take the approach of the begging bowl and what they owe us. We've got to take a proactive approach to what we do. I've personally been involved in some of the meetings with government ministers on the infrastructure. Andrea Ledson was up in Penrith and I think down at Sellafield in recent weeks, and there's encouraging noises that haven't been there before about addressing the infrastructure problem that we have in Copeland. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the afternoon session of proceedings today. I hope you've all enjoyed your lunch and had a good opportunity to network around the place today. Our first speaker, according to the agenda, is Mr. Pete Lutwich, who unfortunately is sick, but leaves us in the fortunate position of having Mr. Brian Howe, the socio-economic manager of the NDA, with us today. So please, for the first speaker of the afternoon, can we give a warm welcome to Brian Howe?
Thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, everybody. So, yeah, Pete contacted me at 7 o'clock this morning. I won't tell you what he said, but he'd had a pretty horrendous night's sleep, and he was off to try and get an emergency appointment at the doctor. Hopefully we'll see him, if not before the end of the week, then certainly next week. So, apologies for Pete. I better explain who I am. So, I picked up Pete's biography because I thought, well, perhaps I can compare myself to Pete, because I think in the NDA land, those of you who know me and those of you who know a lot about football over the years, I'm like the NDA's Paul Madeley, David Fairclough and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer all rolled into one. I am the NDA's eternal substitute. So please bear with me for that. Another football analogy is the one thing that me and Pete, probably the only thing we have in common, is we're about the same shirt size. Apart from that, Pete joined the NDA last year, 2014. I'm an NDA veteran. I joined in July 2005 when we were a brand new organisation established by the Energy Act. And I think that's the first point, really, is what we do is new. We're only 10 years old. Decommissioning is a new industry. We've had nuclear generation, we've had spent fuel management, we have manufactured fuel, we've done all kinds of things. We have never decommissioned before. So decommissioning is a brand new industry, and it's an industry that will be around for a long, long time. The other thing that Pete's biography says is that he's worked 22 years in the nuclear industry. I haven't. I've been 10 years in the nuclear industry, but I don't do nuclear. So I can't give you a nuclear context. You're probably glad about that because we've had a lot of nuclear contacts. What I've done, and I'm 39 years into a public sector career. I've worked in central government, local government here in Cumbria, and I'm now back with central government working for the NDA. I was going to rename the talk I am gladiator, because I'm probably the only civil servant and NDA employee in the room at the minute. So, but we'll come on to that. The other thing that is great for me, seeing so many friends in the room, but also so many people who I don't know, is that somebody a damn sight cleverer than me back at the NDA put the word Cumbria in my job title. And that's great for me because I've lived here for 25 years. It's where I want to live the rest of my life and retire. So I make no apologies back at the NDA for doing my bit for Copeland and my bit for Cumbria, because I feel I've got that remit to do so. And it's because of that that the slides you will see are the slides that Pete would have shown, but I'll try and give a slightly different perspective to them. But there is a couple of things that I have to do first. I have to say who the NDA is, for those of you who don't know. We are a government organisation. We're a very small government organisation. There are just over 200 of us. We are managing an estate of the first generation of nuclear facilities across the country that employs in the order of 20,000 people. So that's quite a difference in our role. Our role is delivering the government's nuclear policy within the constraints of the legislation that we operate, and also, in essence, contract managing that industry. And one of the challenges that we have is bringing better public sector acumen to an industry that had grown up in the public sector. And that's why it's great to see so many businesses here today. We're a national organisation, and some of the things I'll say will reinforce some of the messages earlier. I make no apologies for that, because I think they're important messages. We are a national civil service organisation. Where are we based? We're based 2 miles down the road at the bottom of the hill on Westlake Science and Engineering Park. You don't get many government national organisations outside of London or outside of the big cities. Copeland had us. It now has the National Nuclear Laboratory, and just down the road at Cockermouth, we have the National Skills Academy for Nuclear. So we do have the benefit already as Copeland, as having a strong national brand. And why is that? Why are we here? I was part of the County Council's lobby that secured the NDA to actually be based here in West Cumbria and here in Copeland. Why is that? Because this is where the action is. And Rory's going to follow me and tell you a lot more about Sellafield than what I will. But I hope that during the next 5 to 10 minutes you'll begin to understand the importance of Sellafield now and the importance of Sellafield moving on in the future. And if you think about what's happening in that first generation of nuclear facilities, the Magnox reactors, as Paul said earlier, are coming to the end of their natural life, and we only have one reactor producing electricity at the minute at Wilfer on Anglesey. That comes off the bars at Christmas. Many of the legacy facilities at Sellafield, which you'll be familiar with, we have to decommission, and we have to get cracking on those now. Our other major site at Doonray in Caithness is on a closure contract. In 25 years, we'll have dealt with that site. That means, in nuclear decommissioning terms, and in some of the support services you heard about this morning that I may touch on, or Rory may touch on, in the field of spent fuel management and integrated waste management, the only game in town will be Sellafield. Government's national policy will be focused on Copeland because it won't be focused anywhere else. It will be focused on new build around the country, and the other benefit we have as well is obviously we have new build in our patch as well. So from that sense, I think it's a very opportune moment. I remember conversations in the past with Tim Knowles from the County Council when, you know, we were talking about all the opportunities that were on the horizon, and we thought, well, blimey, if we can't take advantage of this, we're not really doing a good job. And that's really what I suppose today's about. So our core business is clean-up and decommissioning, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of that. It is what it is. We decommission very complicated nuclear facilities. We clean them up. We make land available for other uses. But more importantly, and I think more relevant today, is the other things we are responsible for. So the Energy Act that gave us that responsibility, remember it was written in 2004, came into act on the 1st of April 2005. At that stage, again, as someone mentioned this morning, nuclear was a sunset industry. We were the bad guys. We were coming in to knock down Sellafield and make everybody redundant. That was our raison d'etre. A colleague of mine once said after 4 years, I now feel I can park my car on Sellafield showing the NDA air freshener, Brian. It doesn't feel as bad as it was when we first started. Because obviously the culture change that was going to happen from a site that had been very successful, every time it had been asked to do anything, to a site that in essence had to close itself down, was really challenging. But the world has changed. We've got new build. And more importantly to me, we know that our job at Sellafield is at least another 120 years. So when Robert was talking about the life expectancy of the new gen facility, we will still be decommissioning Sellafield when new gen needs decommissioning. We will shortly have to decommission generation 2 of nuclear facilities. Where is that decommissioning industry? It is in this room, it is in this borough, and the skills are down the road. And that Energy Act gave us a lot of other responsibilities. It said Brian, well, it didn't say Brian, but let's say it said Brian. It says, Brian, you know, you've got to try and get a sustained, skilled workforce for 120 years at a time when nuclear is on the back burner and the gas is soon to switch off. So how do you convince people to join an industry like that? So we have a statutory responsibility to drive skills, capability and training to support opportunities for local people who live around our sites, because those are the ones that we impact the most. It also said to us, you're going to need some help here because it's a challenging job. So you need to work with the supply chain. You need to bring that private sector success to this industry. Have we done that to a degree? Can we be better? I think we probably can. And with your help, we can certainly have a good stab at it. The other thing that we were asked to do is make sure that you use the good ideas, because it's really, really challenging what you've got to do. Nobody's ever done it before. So you're the first, you're the pioneers. Rory said to me at lunchtime, don't forget the word pioneers, because the nuclear industry in Cumbria, from the first days of the nuclear industry back in the late 40s and 50s, this community has been pioneers of that industry. It is now pioneers when it comes to decommissioning. So we provide essential services for government, and we will do for the long term. We're guardians of spent fuel management and integrated waste management services for this country. And we're very conscious of that challenge, and we're very conscious of the role we play here in Copeland. The other thing that I think is really changing in that is new nuclear is given a fresh focus for Sellafield. Not just because hopefully the workforce can gain the ability to do that work for generations 2, 3, 4 and 5, but also because the profile of the nuclear industry at the minute is rested here in Copeland and rested here at Sellafield. If we are unsuccessful in what we do, then we begin to undermine Robert's ability to be successful in new build. So we need everybody's support. Your support is in your interest, it's in my interest, it's in our grandkids' interest to make sure that decommissioning is a success, that Sellafield is a success, and we drive as much sticky pounds into the local economy as we can. And I said, can we do better? I think we can. Please remember, we're only 10 years old. You know, in my day, I'll be thinking about doing the 11 plus. That is the age of our organisation. We are not a mature organisation yet. We're getting there. Our first 3 to 4, 5 years, like all brand new organisations, was finding out what the challenge was. The government gave us 3 years to try and find out how much it would cost. We're still trying to find out. Yeah? Such is the size of the challenge. So we are up for learning, we are up for challenge from yourselves, and we are up for challenging ourselves. And certainly in Pete Lutwich, if he was here, and also Paul Foster, the MD of the site, I've heard them say that. I've heard them say that to Tier 2 companies. We are up. If you think there is a better way of doing business that is good for you, that is good for us, then we're ready to change. And so that is one of the things I'd certainly like you to take away. So, what about Sellafield? And everyone talks about Sellafield, and I'm going to tell you what I think about Sellafield. What I see as a non-nuclear guy, as a bloke who's walked the streets of Copeland and West Cumbria for the last 10 years, is that it provides essential services for the government. It has a lot of money. It has a budget, an annual budget of nearly £2 billion. Any business with that kind of budget, let's see if we can make it more effective. It's becoming a focus for international interest. So we talked about earlier benefits to the UK economy. Last night I had the pleasure of being at a dinner with government officials from across the world, from the United Kingdom Trade and Industry Organisation. 15 people come from as far afield as China, Korea, Japan, America, Italy, across Europe and elsewhere, coming to Sellafield, and I spoke to them before they went on the Sellafield site this morning, interested in how they connect British business with businesses in their countries. So we talk about exporting decommissioning skills. It is beginning to happen. It is no coincidence that when George Osborne went to China the other week, and when the Chinese Premier come here, he talked about a collaboration and a collaboration with this part of the world. China very quickly will soon become the biggest decommissioning market in the world. We have a chance to benefit from that. NDA's just signed a recent collaboration agreement with South Korea. We've already got one with Japan, we've already got one with America, we already have one with our European partners. We are already sharing learning and expertise, and there are already a small but hopefully growing number of local businesses here exporting their products afield. I haven't seen Pete Woolligan here. I don't know whether he is. Pete's company, React Engineering and Createch, are already deploying technology that they've built here in West Cumbria, spun out at Sellafield, to help with the clean-up of Fukushima. So it's happening, and UK is winning contracts. The opportunity's there. And I think it's Sellafield. When you think about what's happening, and I said when the Magnox fleet is defueled and the spent fuel comes where? Comes here, because we have the expertise to manage it. So again, that role of Sellafield can continue for many, many years to come. Nobody yet, well, I think Paul mentioned it nobody has mentioned the low-level waste repository down the road close to the village of Drigg. Notice I'm very careful, close to the village of Drigg. It's not in the village of Drigg. That's a £5 fine. It's close to the village, and it is a community, like everyone in this community, that embraces and supports what it's trying to achieve. And in my mind, it is the hidden gem, one of the hidden gems of what this industry has in Cumbria. It is extremely successful. It has, in under 10 years, diverted 85% of low-level nuclear waste away from that repository into in using other methods of technologies and of disposal that extends the life of that national repository for this country. So that is already a win-win for everybody, and that has been built on the strength of Copeland and Cumbria expertise. LLWR also has its own supply chain, has a slightly different supply chain to the one that Rory will talk about in a moment. It has a national role on our behalf. Not only does it manage a site, not only does it deliver its site, but it manages a national contract in helping us to implement the government's national low-level waste strategy. It is LLWR who seeks business partners from across the country to manage low-level waste. It's a good business to do business with because it can open up the marketplace. So that's kind of like our state here in Cumbria, but it's not actually, because we've got more than that. Do you know there's a damn sight more expertise in Cumbria than just what exists on those two sites? The country's only nuclear rail transporter, direct rail services, is based in Carlisle. Close to 200 employees with skills that the rail industry is crying out for. We own the government share in an international shipping company at the dock in Borough, Pacific Nuclear Transport Limited, that has the responsibility for shipping vitrified nuclear waste back to country of origin. So that transport expertise, that core nuclear expertise all rests in this community. And I think when you look at Paul's slide that said driving economic growth from nuclear expertise, this is where it's at. And those of us involved in Cone, when government turn around and say to us, well, what's in it for me? What do I get out of helping Cumbria? We deliver a very valuable service for you. We need their help. We need your help. Sweat that asset better. And let's try and grow it. And let's try and diversify it. And I do get frustrated sometimes with people who talk about nuclear this and nuclear that, and headline writers who still write the word nuke. We're not into nuking anybody, and we haven't been for donkey's years. What we're into is radioactive waste management. Nuclear is just a form of radioactive waste. It's a very complicated form of nuclear waste management, and I dare not go there because I'm neither chemist, physicist, or a nuclear industry expert. But what I do know is radioactive waste management exists in the oil industry, it exists in the gas industry. So there is already an exportable market there for the skills that come out of Sellafield and out of this community. This map just shows our other sites across the UK. And you'll see although the heart of our operation is here in West Cumbria, they are scattered to the four corners of the country. So benefiting from doing business in Copeland, benefiting from doing business with Sellafield or LWR, immediately opens your business up to that marketplace. The other thing I said is a long-term job. Our most recent calculation says that the cost of decommissioning, what we currently do, Generation 1, is going to cost £115 billion at today's prices. My God, that's a hell of a market to go after. 74% of that money will enable us to decommission Sellafield. That is the gravitas of that single site within that current. We make that a success. We help Robert. We help EDF with Generation 2. We can help oil. We can help gas. We can export those skills abroad. That's what my job's about in the NDA. I'm not particularly focused on what happens nuclear for nuclear sakes because they put that word Cumbria in my job title. That's what I'm focused on, so I work very closely with Mike and Rory and everyone who spoke here today, and it's a very, very, very healthy environment to work in. Let's talk a little bit about the supply chain, because really that's, I suppose, Mike, one of the core reasons why we're here today. So we have this responsibility to develop a robust supply chain. It's taken us a while to get going, I'll be honest about that. We have recently put in place some improvement schemes and embraced government targets on spending more money with SMEs and local SMEs. And the government targets that we've been set, we're now meeting. And Sellafield has stepped up to the plate in the last couple of years and is also meeting those targets. So it's improving. We all know in this room that SME spend doesn't necessarily equate to local spend. Can we do more to get more sticky pounds in Cumbria? We believe we can. I might let Rory explain how he's going to do it, but I think we certainly can. Can we use better the public procurement rules that have been used as a barrier? Yes, I think we can. Can we use things like the Public Services and the Localism Act to actually drive more sticky pounds in West Cumbria? Yes, we can. Through the money we have available, through those other enabling things in skills, in R&D and supply chain initiatives, can we invest that smarter in this borough and this area of the country than we have in the last 5 years? We probably can. But one thing I would say is, remember, we're a government organisation. We are bound by government spending restrictions and economic constraint. And we have to change our message to government. If we are still going to invest in this community and invest in your businesses, it has to be a win for you, absolutely, but it also has to be a win for us. So we need to be able to work with you to make sure that you can benefit the progression of our mission, the ability for us to get the most out of this community and economy, because then there's a win-win for both of us. We have our annual supply chain event next week. It is the biggest supply chain event in Europe. The figures there speaks for themselves. 3,500 suppliers, individual businesses of all shapes, sizes and services to our industry. 98% of them are UK based. Nirvana is 98% of them are Copeland based. I don't go for silly targets, but it does give you an indication that there is still a lot more business out there to be won if we can become more competitive. And I think, when I work with Rory and the likes of Paul Foster and Pete, I think we're certainly up for trying to make that happen. And that comes from being a more mature organisation and having a better understanding of the community that we exist in. So NDA can set guidance, it can set targets, it can set objectives for our industry, but we can't deliver them on our own. We need all your help to do so. So, I don't know how I always get the first session after lunch as well. It's bad enough being a substitute, but being the first session after lunch as well, I don't know, I must have got in bed the wrong side last night. So just to kind of summarise what I've said, because I didn't want to speak for very long, is we're a new industry. We are decommissioning. It is a long-term market. It is already over 100 years long. There are international markets in decommissioning. There are different industries that have markets in decommissioning. We know we have the expertise in Sellafield. We want it to be a win-win for you, for this area, and for us. This industry's been here for over 50 years. Third, fourth generation workers on the Sellafield site now. Jamie, the local MP, is a third generation nuclear worker. It's what we do. And we're going to continue to do it because we're going to be here for a long, long time. But what we do have, when I look around the room, and I said this the other night, myself and Mike and I think there might have been a few other people, we're at a 5-year celebration of the Copeland Community Fund a couple of weeks ago, where there's been something like £11 of investment right into grassroots level in the community that is levered in a further £30 million, all in the last 5 years. That is fantastic at community level, where the voluntary sector and the third sector have been really struggling because of government cutbacks. So that's great, and I said it there and I'll say it again. I was born in the East End, you can probably tell by the accent, in a very strong post-Second World War community, strong sense of community. In the 60s, we moved to the northeast coalfields. When the coalfields were closing, my dad's factory went and took new jobs to the coalfields. Another very, very strong, supportive community. I've never worked in a stronger, supportive community like the one here in Copeland. I took round site yesterday the Chief Executive of the government's major projects authority, very senior civil servant, one of John Clark's personal stakeholders. He come off site, he said two things. He says, it's really great, Brian, and I've worked on oil refineries and all over the place to see people enjoying what they do. So that was a fantastic message. And the other thing he says, I've only been in Cumbria 2 days. I've already noticed how supportive the community are, how loyal and committed the workforce are, and how engaged and supportive the community are. And that's a guy from a senior position in Westminster who's worked all over the world, and he'd been here for less than 48 hours. I think that's a great testament to this community. So just to finish with, you can tell I love it. I enjoy working for the NDA. As I've progressed through my career, I've always had this phrase, is the best job I've ever had. This is the best job I've ever had. It will hopefully be the last job I ever had as well. Because after 39 years in the public service, it might be time to step aside and let someone else pick up the reins. So yes, our industry is challenging. We make no apologies for that, but use that as a positive. It's challenging, it's technical, it's groundbreaking, it's innovative, it's a lovely industry to get involved in. And we have it with a wonderful, supportive community and hopefully a growing supply chain. And you know what? Look out the window. You could be doing this in a lot worse places, couldn't you? Having been born in Hackney and lived in Hettonley Hole, driving to work at Westlakes is a joy, believe me. So, final message. We're here for the long haul. We hope you are too. And if you want to play, come and join us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. Stepping in at the last minute. I think to come back to the football analogy, David Fairclough, super sub. Great job there. The key message I'm taking out of that is in 4 words: Europe's largest supply chain. Get that, Europe's largest supply chain here in Copeland. What we've got to do is earn the right to get more of it. And there is a real opportunity and a real sense of coming together to ensure that we do. Also, there's a lot of talk all the time, and I find it quite frustrating, having, again, grown up in the area, of what the nuclear industry doesn't do, when we should be celebrating a lot more of what it does do. And, just down the road from here, underpinning a huge investment into the Whitehaven educational campus is the nuclear industry. They work very closely with Jamie Reid and with the councils to deliver an educational campus that will be transformational for this area. So, I think we should be thankful for a lot of what the nuclear industry does. And it's really about us getting our act together to earn the right to be part of a lot more of what it could potentially do for us. With that, I would ask the next speaker, could we please welcome from Sellafield Limited, Mr. Rory O'Neill.
Right, so you're the graveyard shift. I've got the slot after the graveyard shift. Okay. Hopefully that's quite familiar to you. That's the Sellafield site. That's quite a new photo. Quite a lot has gone and quite a lot has gone up. But before I start talking about Sellafield, what I wanted to talk about was this event here today. 5 weeks put together. Well done, Mike. Take 2 weeks off. Give us a 5-week deadline. And it comes together. And the reason it comes together is what they say is if you want something doing, ask a woman. But if you want it doing really well, ask several women. So I'd like us all, please, to thank the swans, the people working hard behind the scenes, pedalling away furiously. They've actually put this event together today. So I want to say thank you to our team and the Copeland team working together. Well done. It's really what it's about. It's about partnership. It's about finding something that we work together on and driving it forward. So I'm really pleased that we've managed to do that. So why is Sellafield where Sellafield is? There's a couple of good reasons for that. Fresh water, quite important for nuclear facilities. We get quite a lot of fresh water around here, don't we? Quite a lot this morning. It's a fair way away from where the Russians used to be able to fly their planes. It was outside the limit of the spy planes. It's one of the reasons it's here, up in the northwest. Not out there range anymore. But the other reason it's here is because nuclear was very much an industrial industry, and it grew out of the industrial heritage that Copeland has, steel mining, steel working and coal mining. I'm delighted to hear, by the way, about coal might be on the way back. That's very important. That's part of that diversification agenda. But the other reason it's here is because you have the people that were used to working in those kinds of industries. So it's very much it's a people business, Sellafield. It's about numbers. It's about folk. And Robert spoke earlier about culture, and I want to share a story with you on the back of the visit we had yesterday from the Chief Executive of the Major Projects Authority. And I'm probably going to embarrass colleagues, but I'm going to tell this story anyway. When you go into separation area, you're not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to chew gum, you're not allowed to take snuff, and you're not allowed to eat. And that's one of the ways we make sure you don't inadvertently take an internal dose, because that would be bad, right? So as this Chief Executive was going through the change room procedure, about to go into the separation area and have a look at some of our older facilities, his visit guide, one of my colleagues works for me, reminded him that he was actually chewing gum and he needed to put it in the bin before he actually crossed the barrier. So he said, thank you, I'll do that. And as they crossed the barrier and they walked out, literally walked out the changing room, and the first person they bumped into was just some regular guy going about his business, stopped the visit, and it was clearly a VIP visit, stopped the visit and said to the Chief Executive of the Major Projects Authority, sir, I believe you're chewing gum. And he was, of course, mortified. Oh, God, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, sorry. So obviously we had to remove the gum. But what he then said, which gave me a lot of solace, he said, that's amazing. It's amazing that someone would stop me like that and challenge me like that. And I took great pride in that. And that's the kind of culture that's embedded in the Sellafield workforce and in the Sellafield supply chain. And that's why we're the best at what we do. So that's Sellafield for you. We're a FTSE 100 company. Any other place in the world, we would be a FTSE 100 company. £2 billion a year turnover, roughly. So we have to behave like a FTSE 100 company. Here's some of the numbers. Hopefully these will be familiar to you. 73 years young, 1,000 buildings on the Sellafield site, more than 200 nuclear facilities, and all jammed in within 2 square miles. As Paul mentioned earlier, when you go to see a relevant American facility, it probably covers something like 200 square miles. So we jam it in 2 square miles because we like a challenge. But the challenge that brings us with regard to decommissioning are about the interconnectivity, the inability of there's no laydown areas, there's no space to work. When London Underground Limited send their welders out to learn how to work in confined areas, do you know where they send them? They send them here, because we're the best in the world at it. So that's some of the challenges we face. Small numbers for you. Some of this has been touched on already. 1.9 billion spending at the moment. That's going to stay relatively flat for at least the next 10 to 15 years. People should be able to invest on the back of that. That's predictable government spending. That's not going up and that's not going down. And I very much view that as the underpinning of the Centre of Nuclear Excellence, the underpinning of the commercial and economic opportunity that is Copeland and West Cumbria. It's the heartbeat in many ways. That's there pulsing away. And what we need to do is we need to lever that. We need to lever that for the community. And we need to generate growth and jobs on the back of that. That's the government's agenda, that's Sellafield's agenda, and that's the NDA's agenda. 10,000 employees. I'll just say that very quickly. 10,000 employees. 10,000 employees. That's the largest industrial site in the UK by quite a long way. We're also, I still say this and no one challenges me, the largest construction site in the UK. Although, because we've started finishing some of our missions recently, maybe not. Maybe we're the second largest. But certainly one of the largest in the UK and one of the largest in Europe. Of those 10,000 employees, 5% of those within 5 years will be graduates or apprentices under training. I know that because we've made a commitment to join the 5% club. That's quite a big deal for us. But an even bigger deal for me was noticing that some of our supply chain partners have also started to pay attention. So where's Dave Henderson? There he is. Shepley's Engineering have just made a commitment to join the 5% club. Congratulations, that's a big deal, well done. It's about investing in people, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. If I look at those 10,000 people and I think about some of the challenges we face as an employer with regard to demographics and the age of the workforce, Of course, we're investing significantly in youth. So I was in this building last Friday as 100 apprentices received their certificates. Next year, 150 will receive their certificates. And right now, we've got over 500 apprentices under training. That's quite a big deal. And that makes us one of the largest apprentice providers in the UK. I spend quite a bit of time in London. When I go around on the tube, I see the adverts up on the tube station about Heathrow and Gatwick, and they're in this kind of trade-off on in this war, aren't they, about who's going to get supported. And one of the big commitments that Heathrow are making, that if they get the second runway, they're going to generate X number of apprentices by 2030 or something. And I was just sitting on the tube looking at it, and I realised we'll beat them. We'll beat them. Sellafield and the supply chain will generate more apprentices by 2030 than Heathrow will with the new Heathrow construction project if it goes ahead. That's the scale of the activity we're carrying out together today. We talked a little bit earlier about New Gen and the 6,000 jobs that potentially they're under construction and 1,000 jobs under operation. I know there are people in this room, and I know there's people outside this room who are very much of the view that all those jobs should go to Cumbrians, or indeed all those jobs should go to people in Copeland, or indeed all those jobs should go to people in Frizzington, or indeed all those jobs should go to people in Egremont. There are only 500 people unemployed in Copeland. So even if you gave every single person in Copeland a job, and recognising that of those 500, some of them are literally unemployable, you'd still be 5,500 jobs short. So it's not about whether we need a migrant workforce. We need a migrant workforce. It's not open for debate. What we need to do is we need to land the impact of that migrant workforce in this community. We need the right schools. We need the right accommodation. We need the right pubs and hotels and restaurants. That's what we need, and that's what all this is about. £450 million in wages, Sellafield on an annual basis. About 400 million of that is spent in Copeland. It's not bad, is it? £400 million in wages. Of the 1.9 billion that we spend each year, 1,156 last year was spent in the supply chain. So even I consider 1,156 plus 450 doesn't equal 1.9 billion. And the reason is we have fixed costs as well. So we have to pay our rates, we have to pay our gas bill, we have to pay our water bill, we have to pay for security, we have to pay our regulators. So a lot of that is fixed and we can't move it. So largely the two things that we do have a control over are our wages and what we spend in supply chain. Thus far, this year, we've spent 591 million in the supply chain. That puts us on for having our largest ever supply chain spend ever. I'll come back to that in a little bit. This is a technical slide. This has not come out of my head, although you should have seen it before my comms colleagues got hold of it. What that tells you, if you look from the left to the right, those different blocks of colour are the activity that goes on at Sellafield on a fairly regular basis. Each of those block accurately in terms of its scale reflects an activity. So the dark blue one, for instance, is Magnox reprocessing. I'm not going to ask you to understand that slide. What I'm going to ask you to do is look at where the dotted lines start to kick in and see how the vast majority of those activities are falling away to next to nothing. So that's the end of reprocessing at Sellafield, effectively. That's the closure of Thorpe. That's the closure of Magnox. The yellow block that opens up and has opened up and we're already in, that's bulk retrievals and decommissioning. That's activity that's going on today. I put that slide up because what I want that slide to communicate is the significant change in the Sellafield mission that is going on today and will be going on over the next 5 to 10 years. We're not really in the business of operations anymore, or soon won't be. We're very much in the business of radioactive waste management and retrievals. And as you can see, if you look across the line at the top, the area under the graph remains the same. So we're basically spending about the same amount of money and employing about the same number of people, but doing a completely different thing. And that brings us a huge challenge. It means that a large number of our workforce need to be retrained and reskilled. A large number of people who previously worked in facilities, often for decades or indeed generations, actually need to be moved across to do different things. We'll only do that with the support of our supply chain. And we'll only do that with the support of our workforce. And we'll only do that with the support of our unions, because that is a massive change that we are going to have to undergo. The good news is it presents a lot of opportunity. And the good news is it actually, as part of that, we've managed to do some pretty amazing things. So I like Twitter. And I noticed on Twitter last night that there was quite a lot of coverage about the fact that we finally moved all of the metal fuel, the CAM fuel, out of the pole fuel cladding silo. For those that understand the Sellafield mission, you understand how important that is. You understand how difficult that would have been. But what it's effectively said is one of the most hazardous buildings at Sellafield, and therefore one of the most hazardous buildings in the country, half the radioactivity has now gone. And for those boys and girls that did that, that's a massive accomplishment, and they did that with the support of the supply chain. So it may not mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to us. We're absolutely delighted by that. We talked earlier about some people talked about Olympian efforts and Olympic-type activity. Forget it. Absolutely, it's dwarfed by this. The Olympics had to work for 4 weeks, if you bring the Paralympics in. I have no doubt there were people sitting under desks holding wires together so things didn't break for 4 weeks. And once the 4 weeks were over, they walked away. Sellafield has to work right all day, every day. And that demands a level of effort, a level of attention, and a level of commitment that dwarfs the Olympics. I would also say that the investment in the Olympics at its maximum as a burn is about half of what we do every single year at Sellafield. So it's not an Olympian opportunity, it's way, way beyond that. And we've not mentioned NewGen yet. That's why I put that up. Supply chain spend. I hear quite a lot as I'm out and about, people talking about things being tight at Sellafield, not spending a lot of money. 2015, largest ever supply chain spend. It's a fact. The challenge we face is that we've got more work than money. And this year we're going to spend more money than we've ever had as a result of the support of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, the funding that comes into Sellafield from the Department of Energy and Climate Change goes to wages and it goes to buying goods and services. So let me give you some numbers on that. So the start of the financial year, Sellafield's budget was 1,950 million, or 1.95 billion. We identified some additional work that needed to be done, and that was raised to 1982 million, I beg your pardon. So as I said, that's the highest level of funding we've ever had. As we've gone through the year, we've recognised that we've got more work than money. So we've had to go through a prioritisation programme, and we've had to switch stuff off. It's as simple as that. We've got more to do than we've got funding. And in switching some stuff off, that's caused some challenges for supply chain partners. But we're all businessmen. We all understand that there's many a slip between the cup and the lip, and what you want to do and what you actually end up doing aren't often the same thing. But we're pushing on with this programme. We're starting to achieve some massive successes. Last year, we spent £161 million with supply chain companies in Cumbria. 161 million. Of that, 35 million was spent with Cumbrian SMEs. 35 million Cumbrian SMEs. Emma Jane, you here? Hand up. None of those were contract supply workers, just to be absolutely clear. Those are SMEs as defined by Dun & Bradstreet. So that's quite a big deal. And if you can look at the kind of areas we're spending, you can see it up there. Sorry, you can come get these slides off me. 40-odd million on IT, 80-odd million on materials, 340 million in construction. Most of that stuff is doable by anybody, anywhere. And as a result of that, a significant portion of our supply chain is in the UK and a significant portion of the supply chain is in Cumbria. Enough? No, but a lot. So if I think about supply chain and what we're involved in at the moment, we've got quite a lot of engagement going on because we've got a lot of change going on. So we're involved in supply chain development. We're doing a self-assessment rollout. We'll be working with supply chain partners and prospective supply chain partners to help them understand the challenges we face as a procurer, try and get them into better shape. European competition rules. They present us with a major challenge. The money we spend is public sector money. There are rules around that we have to meet. But there is flexibility within that space, and so one of the things we need to do is we need to make sure that our supply chain understand the challenges we face when we're spending money that is subject to oversight by the European Commission in terms of the way that it's spent. So engaging with people, trying to help them understand the challenges we face and to listen to them about some of the things we can do about that and maybe do things in a different way. What I would say is, under the old model that Sellafield was and is currently working under with the parent body organisation, one of the challenges that that model brought was a significant, I want to make sure I use the right word here because I know they're in the room, a significant lack of interest in exploring where the envelope was on public sector procurement and European Commission rules. The last thing anyone wanted was some kind of challenge under OJU. Under the new model, as part of the ownership by government, Sellafield may have a different appetite. The NDA might have a different appetite, and I know the government has a different appetite. So we may be able to push the boundaries a bit further there with regard to recognising things like localism and supporting local companies. But there are other ways we can do that too. And one of the ways we do that is we look at the way that we procure. We look at an activity which we call responsible procurement. We're really interested in socioeconomics. We spend quite a lot of money doing that at Sellafield, so does the NDA. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But we're driving socioeconomics into our contracting activities now. We're asking our contractors to create socioeconomic plans as they bid for their work. Well, that's great. But the big difference is what we're doing now through contract management in terms of how much money those businesses win. We're enforcing the delivery of those commitments. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. If I say Sellafield Limited spends or invests £3.1 million a year in socioeconomics, and then I see we actually spend, as an organisation, over £1 billion in supply chain, if I can leave a 5% of that billion in socioeconomics, it dwarfs my £3 million that I directly invest. So it's a big deal. I'm going to flag some of these up, give you some idea of some of the stuff that's coming at us, some of the big contracts we've got coming. Supply chain colleagues will be very familiar with these. Some of them are probably bidding for them. So apologies for putting them up there and generating additional interest, but there you go. I would want to put some of these up just to give you an idea. You can see I'd focus on duration and value, give you a size of the scale of these. There's a £225 million project, the 6-step contingency plant project. That's going to run over 6 years. SRPS treatment plant, 180 million running over 5 to 6 years. 160 million over 5 years for the multidisciplinary site works. Combined heat and power plant. It's not all nuclear. Combined heat and power plant. We're going to have a look at how much that's going to cost. We're looking for bids on that or an early market engagement on that, but that will be a significant project as well. Self-shielding boxes, 25 to 50 million. I put those up because what they tell you is there's a lot of work coming out into the market right now. It's not jammed tomorrow. It's actual real stuff hitting the streets today. With regard to SMEs, it's a challenge for us, but we're doing okay. 80% of the money we spend with Tier 2s. So if I'm saying I've got a target for 20% SMEs, that means everything else I need to spend not with Tier 2s, with SMEs. I'm not going to achieve that. What we have to do is we have to drive the SME agenda not only at Sellafield, we need to drive it with the Tier 2s. And I'm delighted that the big Tier 2 companies have got on board with that. We've got socioeconomic workshops going with the Tier 2s. We've got steering committees. We're seeing commitments coming out of the Tier 2s in terms of partnering up with SMEs. And that's starting to make a big difference. And that will drive localism. SMEs and local aren't the same, but they're about as close as you can get to each other. Looking at innovation, because we know SMEs bring that, they bring in innovation and agility, so we're looking at that. We're looking at removing the barriers for SMEs, streamlining tendering processes, commitments with regard to payment terms. Someone mentioned that earlier. About 30-day terms. We do that. We expect the same of our supply chain. I think we've largely addressed that. Another big issue for our supply chain, in particular SMEs, is with regard to intellectual property, so we're giving some thought to how we can do that. We spend quite a lot of our time, in particular my commercial colleagues, out with the SMEs, helping them understand what it is we need from them with regard to their bidding, demonstration of quality, demonstration of standards, records keeping and that kind of stuff, where people often fall down. So we spend quite a lot of time engaging with them on that activity. Some familiar looking beasts there. I put those up because I just mentioned the word innovation.
Even now, half a century later, it's
on.
still radioactive. It's being demolished, but the contractors really need to know exactly what they're dealing with. And for that, they need a robot. And here it is. It's called the Riser, and as you can see, it's basically a drone, a quadcopter, quite like others that you'd see on the market, but this one does have some special features. It can fly right up inside the chimney, venturing into the most inaccessible places. And the data it collects can then be used to draw a three-dimensional map of radioactive contamination.
How cool is that? Isn't that fantastic? That was actually on the 1 o'clock news on BBC about 6 weeks ago. 6 million people saw that, and then it was on World News, BBC World News. About 60 million people saw that, and that's technology developed at Sellafield now being used to help colleagues in Japan and elsewhere. That, for me, is what diversification is about. Sellafield is the heartbeat, the base load of what's going on in the nuclear industry, but I expect and we need our supply chain on the back of that to start spinning itself out into other markets, to bring expertise back to us. Sellafield Limited has signed a cooperation agreement with TEPCO, the people that run Fukushima. One of the great things about that is it's not about them just learning from us, it's about us learning from them, because they're doing some pretty amazing stuff as well. I said it's a people business. It's a big people business. 10,000 directs, about 3,000 contractors, supply chain partners bringing about another 5,000 to 6,000. That's a team of about 20,000 focused purely on the Sellafield mission. It's a people business, and you can't move Sellafield. It's in Copeland. It doesn't move. It's nailed down. So what we need to do as we take on that challenging and changing mission that we have, we need to think hard about how do we attract the talent, the scarce talent that is out there, project management capabilities, some of the best engineering talent in the world. And in order to do that, we need to make Copeland an attractive place to be. It is already an attractive place. Look out the window. It's a beautiful place to live. But what we need to do is we need to make it attractive to people that have choices. As you can probably tell, I'm not northern. I'm only northern in London terms because I'm from Highbury. But when I came up here 4 years ago, the first thing I did is I looked at the schools and I looked at the houses and I looked at the community. And that's what people with choice do. And in order to attract the best talent to this area, the talent we're going to need to create this thing, Centre of Nuclear Excellence, to really put Copeland on the map in a Californian way, we're going to need to make Copeland an attractive place to be. And that's not Sellafield's challenge, that's everybody's challenge. That's Cumbria County Council's challenge, that's Copeland's challenge, that's Allerdale's challenge, that's the government's challenge, and it's everybody in this room's challenge. And the only way we'll meet that challenge is by working together. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rory. I guess 25 years in communications, and you can tell, can't you? Because I think that was a message perfectly articulated of the opportunity that exists. And I don't think you can go to many conferences in many boroughs where they can put a shopping list up of potential future opportunities and contracts that's coming off in front of business people who can bid in an open tendering process to secure those opportunities. You know, I think the slide at the end, was perfect. It encapsulates all the messages we're trying to get across here today. It's nuclear provides us with a foundation to build on it and make Copeland all we know it can be. And we've already heard so much today of the potential that exists within this borough. And again, it gives a lead in to the next session, because it's all about a different way of thinking. My next speaker is John Groves, who works in planning in Copeland, and I know we've got the Lake District National Park planning guys here, and I spoke to them yesterday, and I say to John, it's a case of sometimes screwing the Copeland plan up and starting again in terms of being really visionary in what we need to do to deliver the things that appeared on Rory's slide. And as a council and as a Lake District National Park authority, what we can do to accommodate the right type of properties, the right type of business parks, to allow people to establish the businesses in the area and move key people into the area. So no further ado, could I welcome from Copeland Council, John Groves.
Thank you, and good afternoon. That was the graveyard shift, and that was the shift after the graveyard shift, and I'm going to talk about planning. We'll try to anyway. So we thought that we'd have a conversation this afternoon about how planning might be seen as a facilitator of growth and not the regulator that it might be perceived to be by some. At the start of the discussions about the conference, this was a 45-minute slot, but it's varied in different agenda down to 10 minutes. So I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to be squeezing 45 minutes worth of stuff into 10 minutes or stretching 10 minutes worth of stuff into 45. We shall see about that. But the initial prompt of the whole event was when the two Mikes challenged us to say that Copeland was able to deal with the development proposals that were coming forward and that we were open for business in that context. So that's the purpose of this afternoon, and to talk about one or two different things. For a start, that we hope to show that we understand developer expectations, that we know what the development industry needs from us, and that we have some understanding of how we might deliver that. That is challenging, and I've already been challenged today, usefully, about planners answering their phones and things of that kind. So I appreciate that that's a big challenge of meeting your expectations. But what we do have is an experienced planning team, and I can come on to that in a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way we manage strategic infrastructure projects, the NSIPs proposals, of which NewGen and Moorside is one. And then it's always useless when animations look great when you're setting up PowerPoint, but they never work properly when you run them through. I'm going to talk a little bit about the effective use of planning performance agreements and pre-application discussion, and then at the end just to talk about our local policies and how we react to how we deal with proposals. So forgive me a bit of levity late in the afternoon, but if you want an experienced planning team, this is the sort of thing my team and I have been able to deliver. If anybody's got a planning application for a 40-foot high inflatable Orville, we're the people. If we're talking about enhancing the community, celebrities come into the area, Posh and Becks were no problem for us in the past, so we can deal with them when they realise that Copeland's the place to be. We've had inquiries for the Copeland West Cumbria International Airport. Serious proposals. Somebody came in and tabled with our planners proposals for an airport in South Whitehaven. And finally, on the frivolous bit, had proposals for a floating zoo in the harbour. It's a bit worrying if it's going to end up with an ark. That might say something, but perhaps shows the innovative ways we have of dealing with planning constraints. So forgive a bit of levity late in the afternoon, but that's just to make the serious point that we have a team in Copeland with well over 100 years' experience in dealing with planning applications of all different kinds, and very confident that they have the capacity to deal with the things that are getting thrown at us now. Extremely exciting things. So let's just have a think about what some of the factors that we need to consider in the way we might support development. I think probably one of the most important ones that you'll all come to us with is about certainty of outcome. You want to come to us and talk with confidence that if you propose something, how's it going to be dealt with, how's it going to be treated? And you'll want to know if it's going to be refused, if we're going to have problems, let's identify those early on and to talk about those. There's huge issues about resourcing the process. We're in local government at the end of the day, and we have issues about how we might fund and support the planning team. And clearly, we need to consider how those resources are used and whether there are innovative ways of bringing that forward. And we'll talk about that a bit in a moment. We recognise that timing is clearly crucial. You're going to want to know what time frame, if you propose something, is it going to meet your timetable? Is it going to be achieved within the timetable that Rory or Brian and others are demanding in the wider context of what Sellafield or the NDA are delivering, or indeed all the things that go around that, the houses, the shops, the hotels, and all the rest that we want to achieve. So we recognise that timing is critical in that regard. We also recognise that you're looking for robust decision-making, and we are increasingly confident that we're taking our members, the councillors, to the right places so that you can be confident in those outcomes as at the top, but we've got robust processes to allow decision-making. I think that's challenging, and there's lots of contradictions in the planning arena in that respect, because we also have a lot of people out there who are quite happy with things until it's at the back of their garden fence. So we have all those issues to deal with. But hopefully that shows we do recognise some of the key factors that are necessary in the way we support development. As I said, I thought it might be useful just to talk briefly, given the audience in the room, about the Nationally Strategic Infrastructure projects, again, of which Moorside is one. And you can see all the cluster of different nuclear power plants. They will all be these nationally significant infrastructure projects. But some of the larger wind-related projects, they're also NSIPs. The grid proposal to connect Moorside into the national grid, that's a nationally strategic infrastructure project. And what does that mean? That means that it's covered by the 2008 Planning Act instead of the Town and Country Planning Act. The decision-making process isn't immediately within the local authority's control. We don't issue the planning permission. That's issued by the Secretary of State. And there are some consequences of that. But we have to say that because we've seen all those things happening in Copeland, Copeland is probably uniquely experienced in NSIP's proposals. I've worked for much bigger authorities than Copeland, but they wouldn't know what NSIPs was because they don't deal with that. They might deal with a 1 million square foot of empty warehouse, but they don't deal with the scale of project that we deal with in Copeland. So we have experience of those and can move those forward. But in detail, and I've used some of Moorside's plans here from their initial consultation process, it means that there's a different pathway to delivering development. And I think that has consequences for those of you in the room today because it allows for a different level of engagement. It allows you to go and speak to Robert and his team in terms of how you might engage with the process. And that's particularly because the top site there is actually the Moorside site itself, but the other two coloured diagrams there are what's called the associated development sites. Those are the sites which Moorside NewGen are coming forward with in terms of their proposals for the associated development, accommodation for temporary workers, accommodation for longer-term workers, some of the training facilities, the logistics facilities, and so on. And because that's outside the usual planning process, there are perhaps some opportunities to deliver there which are different from other circumstances. And a particular good example there is that this isn't just about granting planning permission. The NSIPs process is also about site acquisition and a whole range of different legislative requirements which are covered by the DCO, and that means they run through smoothly rather than having to deal with that there, and that there. So it's a whole package of proposals. There is a slight warning shot with that. At the moment, the DCO process doesn't cover housing. So a proposal for housing by NewGen within one of their AD sites isn't necessarily part of the package of proposals at the moment. But there are some opportunities around the whole deliverability of issues that come through that DCO process as a contrast to what might happen within a normal planning process. There was some conversation this morning and probably this afternoon as well about infrastructure, and that's a clear issue in how Moorside might be delivered. But again, there's some opportunities because the Moorside proposal acts as a catalyst. It gives the opportunity to think how you might use that initial development proposal to lever in investment through the LEP and through other places in order to secure the infrastructure that's needed for the whole package of the development, but also has peripheral consequences. It has impacts in other arenas. Lee was in the room from Beck earlier today. I think he had to go, but he really wanted me to say one of the other sorts of things that it also has the scope to deliver. We've got some grant money from DEC to investigate district heat networks, and that's the sort of thing that would be really difficult to get off the ground if you were just trying to do it without any catalyst. But when you've got something like NewGen proposing worker accommodation sites on the south of Whitehaven, there's huge opportunities to think, how can we exploit that opportunity? How can we secure genuine legacy? And for something like a district heating network, which allows for cheaper energy, cheaper power and heat to areas which are perhaps some of the more deprived parts of the borough, this sort of project gives the scope to lever in those opportunities which might not otherwise be available. I think Lee's gone now, so that was a pointless addition, really, but never mind. So, moving briefly on to pre-application discussion, and this is a challenge. As I said, people in the room have already challenged me today that we've perhaps been unable to deliver that, but again, perhaps that's a good conversation to have and to understand how we might improve on that. But clearly that's key to process. And we know we should look to encourage pre-application discussion. We know that it gives the certainty for all of us as to the outcome, and we can have that conversation early in the process rather than as you filled in the forms and submitted applications. We know it gives clarification of the key issues and enables understanding of all parties engaged in the process, so we each know what we need to do in order to move a development proposal forward. Critically, I think it gives the opportunity to deal with specific areas of possible contention, and whenever you make a planning application, there will be somebody who doesn't like it. I guess apart from taxmen, town planners are likely to alienate more people than anybody else, or at least have somebody who likes you and somebody who doesn't like you in making one decision. It also gives us the opportunity to think about what stakeholder engagement is necessary. So on a development proposal of any scale, it allows us to think, well, do we need to speak to the county highways people? Do we need to speak to our environmental health people about ground contamination? It allows that wider stakeholder engagement, and critically, it allows us to give some direction as to which parts of the community we should be engaging with to help smooth the application through. And I think there's been one or two recent fairly significant development proposals where we have been able to point people to residents groups, to town and parish councils, and that engagement has made the development process ultimately smoother. And finally, we don't charge for that. You will find lots of authorities do. We've made a deliberate decision that we won't charge for pre-application engagement. My experience of that is actually you really struggle to meet your costs by the time you put lots of admin in place to deal with it. But I also think it sometimes puts off people, particularly at the smaller scale, smaller end of development. We started charging several £100s, even though they're for tens of £1,000s worth of development. Often that puts people off, and that's not what we want to do. We want to have that early engagement. Planning performance agreements. It'd be interesting perhaps to take a bit of a poll as to how many people in the room have dealt with planning performance agreements. Again, my experience was quite wide before I came to Copeland, but it was something new. It was something that Copeland, despite being a really small authority, had experience of, which you don't get in other places. And to some extent, we're at the fore. We're right at the cutting edge on the use of planning performance agreements. And essentially, there's some legislation, I can never remember the particular act, it's some miscellaneous provisions act somewhere, allows us to enter into formal agreements with potential developers so that we can seek to fund and have a clarity over project management of development proposals. Obviously, when we're dealing with something as big as Newgen and Moorside, and with Sellafield projects, we have PPAs with them, but we've successfully used those in other arenas. And what PPAs are about, they're about project management. I would always say that a town planner is inherently a project manager, but perhaps in the past they haven't planned the process from beginning to end, and it hasn't always been seen through in a logical sense. But increasingly, and particularly with PPAs, we can set down the project management, the goals, the outcomes, and a time frame for those outcomes to be achieved. Hopefully it gives some certainty over outcomes and allows us to go back to the initial slide and deliver those things that we think the development industry needs, that you need to know what's the outcome going to be and how can we plan for that. It gives us that certainty over timing, because within the agreement we would say we will deliver these on particular milestones within a process at a particular point in time. And as I've already said, I think we've dealt with probably more PPAs than lots of authorities, certainly authorities of Copeland's size. And coming to the end, I think we have effective local policy. We have an up-to-date local plan. We are currently working on our site allocations development plan, and that's the one that actually draws lines on a map and starts to say this is where things will happen. I think we have a fresh and different approach to supply, and it's something that Copeland can do differently to lots of other authorities, because there aren't quite the same constraints here. And drawing on experiences in places like Cheshire, where you've got green belts, huge supply problems, probably local plans taking years and years to get through the examination process, our local plan went through an examination in 2 days. We haven't heard that happen anywhere else. And I think that's a product of clarity of thinking. It's a product of understanding what our market looks like and understanding the need of particularly housing within the area. And the local plan inquiry inspector understood that. He also recognised that this is probably one of the most complicated areas he'd dealt with because of the impact of the nuclear industry and the uncertainties that brought with it, and not knowing what was going to happen when, but that was prior to the decision by NewGen and before Moorside moved in the way it has recently. I think we've got some innovative approaches to master planning. We had some on the table in the corner there of the way we dealt with some areas in South Whitehaven, and I think that was an imaginative and well-considered way in trying to bring development forward and creating that understanding between local authority and developer in the way that a development might look and the demands that might be placed with them. I think this is an important one, and probably when I started out in my planning career a little while ago now, you didn't worry much about viability. That wasn't our concern. If we liked the colour of the bricks, that was the important thing, and it didn't matter if they were the most expensive bricks in the world. That was the challenge. But increasingly, we know we've had to understand that, and I think there is absolute understanding of that in a Copeland context. We know that land values are different here to what they might otherwise be. We know that they have implications for a wide range of other issues. We know we can't go into places and make huge demands for all the bells and whistles because the development won't stack up. And we have a choice then in some cases. If we add all those on, the development won't occur. Used an acronym there, and apologies for that, but it won't fit on the page otherwise. Community infrastructure levy. You will see lots of authorities throughout the country having shopping lists. They will say £1,000 for every dwelling to run the libraries, another £1,000 to run the cemeteries, and so on and so forth. Again, we've made a deliberate decision at this point in time that we shouldn't do that, and that's a reflection again of our understanding of viability. So I hope that paints the picture that we are trying to be developer friendly, that we do understand the market that we operate in, and it's not our ambition to start putting constraints in the way of development. And finally, I think we do have the scope to operate with innovation and flexibility. I think there was somebody over in that corner cringed when Mike said, let's rip up the development plan, and that probably can't happen. But I think we do have the capacity to interpret those plans with flexibility, and for when people come forward with ideas that have scope to add to the growth agenda and support a wider agenda, that we have the capacity to do that. I think we can be quite bold in the way we look at design and the way we look at issues of that kind. All planners hate Kevin MacLeod because he leaves you all with the impression that, oh, the planners stop this, the planner. I just wish I had innovative proposals come before me, and if we did, we're more than welcome to try and deal with them. I've thrown a picture of a nice house on Millimon there to just show that we can be a bit imaginative. But unfortunately, all too often, we had an application in the other week, and it looked like somebody had got the box set of grand designs for Christmas and picked for each programme the bit he liked and put it together in one plan. And that was difficult. But I really think at that scale and beyond, we can be innovative, we can be flexible, and allow the development industry to come forward with different ideas to meet particular requirements. As I said, I think we have got robust decision-making. I think you could challenge me a lot on that, because at the end of the day, we place our decisions in the political arena, and politicians represent their local communities, and sometimes they are challenged to deliver decisions which may not sit with our aspirations in terms of wider growth. But we do have clarity in strategy. We do have understanding through the local plan of what the planning process should deliver. But increasingly that strategy is underpinned by the concepts around growth, and we have other documents which are growth strategies. They say the ambition of the borough is to grow and to secure growth, and that dictates the way that other planning policies look, and increasingly that's the case. We also have a growth strategy which is founded on deliverability. We've been out and spent money with consultants, which is a bad word, but never mind. But we've spent money to understand what we need to do to make sure things happen. And again, it's not back in the old days where you had that fixed set of town and country planning colours you used to have to colour in maps. And that's what you used to do. But now that's not good enough. It's necessary to go beyond that and make sure that when you start talking about allocating land and looking at sites for development and the ambition to secure growth, that's founded on deliverability. I think this is an important one, and I probably touched on it a second ago without intending to, but I think we are getting increasingly informed membership. It's a challenge to train members because of where they operate in that political environment, but I think we're having an increasingly intelligent and informed dialogue with our members, who ultimately are the decision makers, and they understand our ambitions and expectations, and they too start to understand the constraints and issues that affect the development industry. And I think that's my final slide. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate that there's some challenges in there, but I hope that demonstrates that we are open for business, that if you come to us with proposals, we will look at them pragmatically and try and engage. There will be some times when we say, sorry, that's not going to work, but we will explain that to you. So I hope that's assisted, and come and see me and my colleagues in the corner if we can help on anything specific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, John. And I think the real message is that we do want to be innovative, and we do want to be flexible. As I said earlier, in Copeland, we want house building on unprecedented levels. We want the development of office space, for first-class office space in our towns that we know that we're going to need. Hundreds of thousands of square feet already being identified as a necessity. Putting that in our towns and people in those offices helps retail, and we want to support retail in our towns. That all goes towards regenerating our town centres. We want hoteliers and people with the accommodation to come forward and talk to us. The message is we want to work with developers. We want to help you. There's also another message, and it's a message I want to get really, really clear, and it might sound a hard message. You know, we have some people who buy up buildings and they sit on buildings and let them get into dilapidated states while they sit on the sidelines while they wait and see what happens. If that's what your plan is, I'm coming after you, and it ain't going to happen. It's because I'll enforce with every power available to me that we have buildings kept up to a state that's fit for purpose in the town. And it's the same if people want a land bank. If they just want a land bank and sit around and see if things develop in a way that they should, it's not acceptable. We'll release other land and we'll leave you behind. We don't want people sitting on the sidelines. We want people out on the field making things happen, not waiting to see if they do happen. And we'll do everything that we can to try and facilitate that process. But the message is, you know, we want clearly to work with developers. A couple of weeks ago, I was down, and I could see just by Trudy in the audience over there, who gave me a tour of Bootle and how they've worked on the Wellbank project down there. And it's inspirational. It's just another example of what can be achieved. And I think, Trudy, you've worked fairly closely with the planners and with the Lake District National Park. And it's a fabulous development that will revitalise a village in the heart of the Lake District National Park, and some great work. It was, you know, a fantastic day that we had down in Bootle. Another Q&A. Could I ask Rory, John, and Brian to join us? John Rowlands. John, could you join the guys on the panel? You know, as before, you've heard from three of the guys. I've asked John Rowlands to join the panel. John is the MD of Roma Innovate. John's an ex-Sellafield employee who stepped out of Sellafield to set his own business up by tapping into the supply chain. He's a role model, really, of what can be achieved. And John's working with me, with people like Pete Woolligan, Brian Watson, the ex-MD of Sellafield. They're working with me as advisors, unpaid advisors, I might add. They're working with me because they care about the community that they live and work in, and helping us and helping businesses tap into that supply chain. So have we got any questions for the guys on the panel? Right, I've got some questions that's been sent by print. This is from Tim Knowles, County Councillor and National Park Member. It's for you, Rory. In May this year, Mr O'Neill wrote that West Cumbrians move away from having a sense of entitlement towards recognising they must play their part in delivering solutions. The sooner we will see greater benefit from taxpayer investment. As a public sector company, Stakeholder Relations Director, how do you intend to ensure that the organisation lives up to the responsibilities and host communities? And how will you be able to measure Sellafield's success and failure in that regard?
Thanks, Tim. Entitlement's an interesting word, isn't it? It's an incendiary word, deliberately so. When I look at Sellafield Limited's responsibilities, I largely see 5 different things. Sellafield has a responsibility as an employer. Sellafield Limited has a responsibility to its supply chain. Sellafield Limited has a responsibility with regard to socioeconomics. Sellafield Limited has a responsibility with regard to cooperation. And Sellafield Limited has a responsibility to the environment. So let's do those one at a time. 10,000 people, £450 million in wages. I'm going to say I think we're doing pretty well on our responsibility as an employer. Terms and conditions, safety rates, I'm going to say we're doing pretty well as an employer. 150 apprentices this year, 500 apprentices under training. I'm going to say we're doing pretty well as an employer. Investing in skills in this region, Whitehaven campus, construction skills lab, Energis. I'm saying we're doing pretty well as an employer. Supply chain. 14% of the money spent by Sellafield Limited is spent directly in Cumbria. Directly. I'm not talking about what's been spent by our Tier 2 colleagues. Over 20% of the money spent by Sellafield in the supply chain is spent with SMEs. So we're ahead of target. And we've got production, we've got procurement plans out in the market. So people can see what's coming so they can get involved. So I think we're doing pretty well with the supply chain, our responsibility with the supply chain. Socioeconomic perspective, we invest £3.1 million a year into socioeconomics in West Cumbria. And we also invest in socioeconomics in Risley, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we've got nearly 2,000 employees in the Warrington area. We've put socioeconomics right at the heart of our procurement policies, part of our responsible procurement plan, as I talked about previously. DDP, Decommissioned Delivery Partnership, is the first contract that's made its way through Sellafield since we've introduced responsible procurement. 10% of the weighting on the DDP contract is around socioeconomics. You're as likely to win that contract based on your commitments and performance on socioeconomics as you are on quality. I think we're doing pretty well on socioeconomics. Environmental. The largest environmental remediation programme in the UK. Acutely aware of environmental impact. I was really interested actually to see the survey that came out yesterday that talked about the dose rates in and around Cumbria. Anyone see that survey? You see that? Emily Godson tweeted it last night. I told you about Twitter. Apparently the uplift in dose for the average or the typical person in and around Sellafield has gone up. Not as a result of what's going on at Sellafield, but as a result of dietary changes. Apparently we eat more lobster. And because lobster's a bottom feeder, it picks up more contamination. Interestingly, from the closed fertiliser plant at Whitehaven rather than Sellafield, because of plutonium that's released as a result of the manufacture of fertiliser. So I think we're doing pretty well on environmental. And on collaboration, we're here. We're at the heart of Cone. We work closely with our partners, Copeland and County, Tim. We work closely with our supply chain, and we work closely with the NDA. So I think we're doing all right on collaboration too. So with regard to responsibilities, I think we're doing okay. Could we do better? Yeah, we could certainly do better. On all 5 of those fronts, we could do better. But I think we're doing okay.
Thanks, Rory. The next one will be for Brian and possibly yourself, Rory. It's from Brian Watson. Brian's asked, could NDA and Sellafield for a view on how they will rationalise their commitments and obligations to West Cumbria and Cumbria whilst abiding by the the oven competition rules, the OGEN competition rules. You want to pick that one first, Brian?
Yeah, if I can perhaps kick off, because I want to add to Rory's last question, because I know that everybody in this room will be watching him. We'll be watching him. You know, NDA will assume ownership of Sellafield. We've previously had a contractual relationship, and we have a contractual partnership, myself and Rory. At the end of the day, remember, we won't go into the technicalities of model change, but the core function of Sellafield to deliver a scope of work to cost, to time and schedule using public money doesn't change. That includes, as Tim's question kind of like suggests, some, and I mentioned them earlier, some real responsibilities within the Energy Act on impact on local communities. What we have to do in Cumbria, and it kind of leads into Brian's question as well, is that we have to find a different rationale for continuing to invest at the levels we've invested in this community. Why? Because in the short term, in other areas of the country, we are knocking down buildings, we are making people redundant. I was speaking to Steve Nicholson from the Prospect Union. I can guarantee if Steve was the Prospect member for Chapel Cross, or he was the Prospect member for Bradwell, or one of the other stations where there isn't the opportunities that there are at Sellafield and at New Missions, he would be banging on my door and he would be saying, why are you spending all that money up in West Cumbria when it's my members who are losing their jobs? We know, you know, that it's exactly the right thing to continue to invest in that in this community. We want to invest in this community. We both want to invest in this community. But we have to demonstrate to government and the people who govern us that we get something out of it to help you get something out of it. There are very positive impacts here in West Cumbria of this industry. There are some negative impacts. There is sometimes a nuclear premium. But we have to recognise that and we have to find ways to overcome it. How can we work within public procurement better? Is Henry still here? Or has he gone? Is Henry gone? That's a shame. Henry took me to task starting about, it feels like 10 years ago, I'm sure it was only 3, about the Public Services Act and the Localism Act and the fact that, as Rory mentioned earlier, the culture at Sellafield in the past has, by its very nature, been very risk averse, so it wouldn't push the envelope. We do think that part of the benefits of coming under NDA ownership, so it comes back into public sector ownership, we can apply some of the levers and the flexibilities that exist in the UK's home legislation to that challenge, so we might be able to do that. Certainly a piece of work that's going on, and perhaps Rory can say more about that. I'm also going to plug another consultation document, and I was sitting there and I thought, oh no, Brian, don't plug another consultation document. You're consultation fatigued as a community. We are currently engaging on our third 5-year strategy. This will set the journey for our business for the next 5 years. The first one in 2005, I wouldn't say it was written on the back of a fag packet, but it was written in 12 months. So it was pretty immature. The second one 5 years ago really began to narrow our nuclear understanding of our task. So it set the priorities for risk and high hazard reduction that has brought so much extra money into Sellafield and will do for many decades to come. And it nailed a couple of other big nuclear things. This time, our challenge to everybody is, tell us where we can do better on those mandatory enablers. How can we apply our skills strategy better? How can we apply R&D better? There are plenty of hooks in there. There are a couple of interesting paragraphs about can NDA be allowed to be more commercial in the way we approach our business? Can NDA be given more commercial flexibility to, who knows, begin to chase other work? Now that's all of the kind of the things that have frustrated people about some of the structures in the Energy Act. What I think you do, I think you have an opportunity with a new strategy to put a challenge back to us about the way we do business, and therefore a challenge back to our governor, the government. Because if we are, as we all want to do this morning, convince government that we've got a valuable service and an excellent supportive community and supply chain here, well then let's also build the right argument for where they can help us invest and change the way we operate to make it easier for you and make it easier for Sellafield. So I think that's from a strategic organisation would be my ask. Have a look at that. We are conscious, as Rory says, we need to do more, and we're having a go.
Do we have any questions from the floor? Richard.
Thank you, Mike. I know a lot of people in the audience today. Thank you ever so much, but not everyone. My name's Richard Mulholland. At this moment, I'm specialising in plots of land for our local self-build community. I want to come down to base level on my question. I want to talk about the poor bloody community. We've heard, and I've been very interested to hear of consultations, and all been wonderful. I've heard an awful lot of keywords, a lot of it not meaning an awful lot to me, being a non-nuclear resident of this area. Before I pose my question to you, I want to say to Mr. Mayor, Mike, before coming here this morning, I was a wholehearted supporter of yours. I now say that I'm a totally wholehearted supporter of yours, of such a wonderful conference. And that brings me on to the question for the panel. As a community, being a wonderful community, we have, however, suffered and do still suffer from low expectations. I believe it's a false expectation and a false view, but the view is very often low expectations. What I've heard today is really what our children at school, I let people here today who know far more about education than I do, tell me at what age level we should be introducing the emotion, the support, financial and otherwise support that this area benefits from the nuclear industry and associated industry. So my question eventually is, you have three things to build in my view. You may want to tell me that there's a heck of a lot more than three things. You have three things to build in my view. You have to build a Moorside complex. You have to build a supply chain. And you have to build a community. How do you intend to go about building the community? And at what stage would you commence taking into the schools the enthusiasm that you all and other speakers have put forward today, which has enthused me, and that takes some doing at my age. But it's been so enthusiastic, I want your message to go out. So I'm looking to you for advice as where you should start talking to schools, both to the pupils and to the teachers, all of whom are wonderful teachers, but perhaps could be improved by having more support from you. Thank you.
John, do you want to start us off? John, do you want to pick up on that one?
Just to give you a little bit of background on what I did, I actually worked at Sellafield for about 10 years, and during that time I dreamt up the idea of setting up my own business, and so that's what I did, and it was a big challenge to leave Sellafield, which is just the holy grail of jobs around here, and many aspirational things of kids in school is to work just at Sellafield. You've reached the pinnacle of your career if you get a job at Sellafield. Because of the high wages at Sellafield and the fantastic conditions it has, in many ways that suppresses that entrepreneurial spirit in the area. I think the spirit is there. We perhaps need to go into the schools with successful entrepreneurs and promote that a bit more, to say that there is something outside of just Sellafield. In fact, it might have been interested in supplying Sellafield. And to give you an example of what the speakers touched upon earlier, when I first set up, I was totally dependent on Sellafield. And when I left Sellafield, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I had 4 kids. I worked as a shift instrument mechanic at Sellafield, and to leave Sellafield was the biggest decision of my life. Did I regret it? Every day of my life for about 3 years, I regretted leaving Sellafield. It looks glamorous being in business, but by heck it isn't. After them years, would I go back now? No. Fantastic place to work, but I've enjoyed being an entrepreneur. So perhaps kids at a fairly early age seeing entrepreneurial spirit that actually happened from within Sellafield, because I was actually the first one that was a spin-off that came out of Sellafield and became an entrepreneur, if you like. And just to touch on again what they said is that I benefit from about £3.5 million of the business a year from Sellafield. But this year, my company turned over £8.5 million. And we do all of the MOD kits around the whole of the country. If there's a dirty bomb anywhere, Roma supply them. We supplied 30% of all the suits in the recent Ebola crises that we had. So with a West Cumbrian success story, but by hell, I nearly didn't do it because it was so comfortable in Sellafield. And I think Sellafield, almost by accident, it suppresses entrepreneurial spirit purely because of the conditions and the wages are so fantastic there.
Thank you, John. Have we got any more from the floor? Sorry, Rory.
I'll just pick up on that. The innovation piece and the anchor that is Sellafield in terms of its term, we are horribly aware of that. We are nowhere near as flexible, as agile or innovative as we need and must be, in particular with our changing mission. So it's right at the forefront of our thinking. In direct answer to your question, Richard, Key Stage 1, 7, 8 years old, that's when we start speaking to kids about science and maths and engineering. That's where the conversation starts. Sellafield Limited has about 2% of the country's STEM ambassadors. That's not bad. And we get to about 1,000 schools in the Cumbrian area where we go and do education outreach. We try to get to every school in Cumbria each year. What we're looking to do now is coordinate that work with our supply chain partners and try and reach not only every primary school but also every secondary school in Cumbria. That's the plan.
I think just quickly, Mike, the other thing I would add is it's not the first time I've heard that request in the last 6 months. When we've been going round about strategy, one of the big things that I've continued, you have to be better at engaging with young people. We have our regular quarterly site stakeholder group next week. I can guarantee the average age in the audience will be well over 40. They are the same people probably who we started with 10 years ago. We are not engaging very well with young people. It's obvious. I think the other benefit we do have, and Rory touched on it, we do have now a growing number of young people work for us. Years ago, I used to do some work with young enterprise in secondary schools. I wouldn't do it now. They don't want to listen to me. You know, I've had my day. What they do want is role models. They want entrepreneurs, but they want other young people who've come fresh out of college, fresh out of school, who've got careers and a job, and who can go into school and they can look at young kids in the eye and they can look at them and say, I want to be like you. They don't want to be like me, but they want to be like a lot of the young people we employ. And I think Sellafield can have a critical role in driving that fresh approach into schools using young employees.
Stephen at the back.
Just to make a comment, as Mark introduced himself earlier, I'm new in at West Lakes. People may know this, but I'll say it anyway. West Lakes Academy is a sponsored academy. It's because it was a school that needed to be transformed. There are 3 sponsors to that academy: Sellafield, the Nuclear Decommissioning Agency, and UCLAN. And we are so grateful and appreciative of the work that goes in. And our kids benefit from that, changing lives through learning.
Have we got any more from the floor? Steve?
Thanks, Mike. Steve Nicholson from Prospect Union Sellafield and also the Sellafield Workers' Campaign. Possibly to the whole panel, my good friend John said I had to give him a question.
You need to stand up, Steve.
I've never heard that before. I was going to say about ambitions, and one of the ambitions from the Sellafield Workers' Campaign is to ensure that we can push forward to make West Cumbria, or Cumbria, the centre of nuclear excellence. And my other ambition is to get John Rowlands to buy a drink, which I don't know which will come first. Question to the panel: how are we going to learn from the boom and bust of Thorpe And the other one is about setting standards, and we mentioned this before, about setting standards. Nothing I would love more is for Copeland to be an unemployment-free zone, and Rory said we've got about 500 people who's unemployed. We need to make it accessible to everybody. If you come out of school with no qualifications, you can stack shelves in Tesco's, but you can't stack towels at Sellafield. Thank you.
Before the panel speak on that one, it's one of the earliest things I identified, and at the very first meeting I had with the guys at Sellafield when I come in, is that the best academics don't always make the best practical people. So just because you can get 5 O levels in physics and maths and science doesn't mean to say that you're going to be the best electrician, joiner and plumber in the world. And certainly being a lawyer in the laundry is bordering on the ridiculous. But in fairness, it is recognised within Sellafield. They've already started to address that with West Cumbria Works, where we're working with the local job centres with youth unemployed and long-term unemployed, and guiding these people into skilled roles. So, you know, Sellafield recognise where we are with that. Because the other thing with academics in practical roles is the very nature of the fact that they are academic and they are bright, is that they won't be in the job that they're trained for very long, because they'll progress where their academia will take them. So we've still got the same skill shortage 4 or 5 years down the line. It's been recognised at Sellafield, and it is being addressed, and it's all, again, about us working in partnership to deliver a better Copeland. Is there anything you want to add on that, Rory?
On that particular one, I mean, that's a killer for us, because you invest a lot of time and money into getting people to the right qualifications. And what we need to understand is how attractive those apprenticeships are. So we're talking about crafts and people and apprentices. I know a lot of people in this region who apply for university in case they don't get a Sellafield apprenticeship. University for them is plan B. It's what they do if they don't get their apprenticeship. And then they come to Sellafield and they undergo the training and they get their apprenticeship and they do really well. And God forbid that I should limit their aspiration. But they see it very much as their first step on their managerial career. And you're quite right, Mike. You're looking for people who are practical, who can develop their skill set within that skill set rather than as the first step on a ladder. So one of the things we give some deep thought to is how do we ensure we get the right quality people at the right levels, the appropriate people at the right level. Having people with degrees working in the laundry doesn't make any sense. What we need is people that enjoy that job and are capable of doing that job and want to do that job, because otherwise we end up with a churn. So that's a big issue for us. With regard to the boom and bust, I think that's probably a question better asked of our planning expert.
Expert, I like that. I didn't experience Thorpe, so I can't hear people tell me about it and hear from Mike what it was like. But I think what I can say is that from the outset, our dialogue with New Gen very much reflected the ambition that it wasn't just a short-term thing. We've thought about how Hinckley has approached things in Somerset, and there's people on board with New Gen who had experienced that directly and brought expertise to the table about how that worked, and that the ambition had to be founded on legacy, and it was long-term, and it wasn't just about fantastic 6,000 people in the borough spending all the money during the construction process. It was about how do we make sure that they all stick here? What do we do in terms of making sure that they don't just live in porter cabins for 6 months and then all disappear and we go back to a green field, but that we actually have a whole range of legacy benefits from that. And I think the unique aspect that we have in Copeland is the fact that there's lots of other things going on that would be incredibly challenging if we were totally reliant on New Gen alone and that was the only game in town. But the issue that we have here is that actually there's it's the whole cone thing. It's the things that Paul Howard talked about this morning. It's developing our ambitions that New Gen's one aspect of a multifaceted set of development, set of opportunities, set of investments that are coming our way. And if we take from each of those properly and correctly, New Gen will be of huge benefit. It will be a catalyst to all sorts of things, but just a catalyst. It will allow other things to happen and flow from it. So it won't be just that boom. It'll be there'll be continuity and legacy following that.
Thank you, John. I'm going to have to draw the questions to a close. We are going to be around a while for an opportunity for people to network. Most of the panel members are all still here. Before I draw, it's been quite a long day today, and before I draw events to a close, I would like to thank our host here at Whitehaven Golf Club. I think they've been fantastic hosts. They've provided a fantastic venue and food. I'd like to thank the guys from Ad Media who've done the film that you came into. That film will be available on the Copeland Elected Mayor Facebook tonight. I think it's fabulous. It just portrays Copeland exactly how we wanted it portrayed. So, thanks to the guys who've done that film. I would like to thank all the speakers today. They've given up the time, and it's a very expensive time to give up, and they've committed that to support us at Copeland, to support this community, and get the message out of what we've really got to offer in this area. I'd really like to thank you, Jen and Sellafield, who have supported this conference, both with the presence and with the staff. And, these things don't just happen. And there's been a team of people, notably Karen Morley-Chesworth, who's been around today, Mike Graham, John Groves, Emma from Sellafield, and Catherine Jenkins from Newgen. A lot of this planning has been compressed into a very short period. I'm a great believer you're going to do something, do it urgently, and they didn't have a lot of time to prepare and get ready. And the conventional wisdom was, if you try to do this in 5 weeks, you'll not get many there. And the next day they said he's even picked a week in half term, so you'll get even less there. I think what they've delivered today is fantastic, and it's allowed us to showcase Copeland and to get a message out of everything that we had to offer. And it is so important that we seize the opportunity this time. Steve alluded to it before, and he looks much older, but he's the same age as me. And we were around at the time of the boom and the bust, and we saw the fantastic times that Egremont, where I'm from, was. And you just think it's going to last forever when you're living through that experience, but it didn't. It didn't just sort of slow down. It came to a juddering halt, and we've seen the remnants of that and still evidence of it now when you walk down some of the high streets. So it's important we seize the opportunity. It's important that we build a lasting legacy, and it's important for a whole number of reasons. I said earlier, when I came into this job in May, when I was elected, I was optimistic for a better Copeland. I was enthusiastic, and I was pretty much aware of most of the things that I would come across in this job. One of the things that I wasn't aware of, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that I wasn't aware of it, is the level of poverty and deprivation that still exists in this borough. I was at the Howgill Centre yesterday, and some of the stories they could tell me of the conditions families in Copeland are living in, and some of the stories about babies 11-month-old and children going to school who still haven't learned to talk because there's been no parental engagement, is something I didn't expect to encounter in this job, and I certainly didn't expect to encounter it 3 miles from my own front door. So, a lot of the things that we need to do, it's important that we do to develop this community and to give those people in those situations an opportunity to break that cycle. And we can only do that by creating the type of diverse economy and by building on all the opportunities that we've talked about today. And, the opportunities are endless and they're unparalleled anywhere else in the UK. The investment that's coming in is massive. The supply chain we've heard about that's already here is significant, and that is just nuclear. There's all sorts of other potential opportunity, because nuclear has not got to be our sole driver going forward. It's got to be the foundation that we build the total solution on. Most of all, I'd like to thank you all. I've said all we can do is create an environment that facilitates a better Copeland. The people in here can actually make it happen. And together, and all the various members of the panel and the organisations that we can represent, I am 100% convinced over the next few years we can make Copeland be all we know it should be. thank you, everybody, for your attendance today. And as I said, we will be around. So thank you very much for your attendance today.